Happy Monday and welcome to another episode of Wrestling Tonight live from No Sale Studios. I'm the Ace of the Tavern, Acefield Retro, and as always, joined by the co-founder of the Turnbuckle Tavern, Chad. What's up, dude?
Same old shit, man. Wrestling. A lot of good news. A lot of new champions. A lot of fun hypotheticals to talk about, and just what we've come to love about wrestling tonight. We're gonna break it all down. All the stories, all the promotions, anything out there. We're gonna talk about it.
Yeah, it feels like week to week. There's so much that happens in between. We try our best to update the document that we have living from week to week because so much gets lost in the cracks, but we make sure we're going to be covering you guys end to end. So if you missed anything in between the week, we have you covered from Impact, GCW, and our two main stories speak to it, man. We got an Impact story and a GCW show. What else can you ask for?
I know I love weeks like this because usually the big promotions dominate the storylines a lot of times, but I love episodes where we can throw some love to the other promotions that we enjoy just as much as the big dogs. So it's always fun to dive into anyone else. I think GCW, we covered Tournament of Survival. Now they're popping back up after all of our hypotheticals last week of what could happen. So I think it's going to be fun. We're going live this week. Sometimes, peek behind the curtain. We record on Sunday mornings. That's our coffee editions. And I got a brewski. When we're live, it's brewski edition. So this should be fun.
Absolutely. And we're on the precipice of what is going to be a historic summer, not just through WWE and AEW, but Impact, everyone playing ball, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Noah, Stardom. There's so much on the table, and I'm happy you guys are along for the ride. Make sure you guys follow us along. Be here every Monday to break it down. If you can't be here watching the video, come and check us out, audio version, Tuesday mornings as they drop. But with that being said, let's get to our big story number one.
Let's do it.
Big stories. Story one.
Big story number one. In a surprise victory, Alex Shelley is the new Impact World Champion. He defeated Steve Maclin at Against All Odds in Columbus, Ohio. He picked up the win clean, Chad. Hit the shell shock finisher in the evening's main event. The crowd popped, adjusting to everyone's shocked. When I heard this happen, especially you and I have been talking about Impact week after week about Steve Maclin's run, building up this big feud with Nick Aldis, but it seems like they've pivoted and they're moving in a completely different direction. And then Alex Shelley gets his first world championship, being a guy who's been with this company for a very long time, a legacy act in Impact. And here he is starting the reign.
Yeah, this was shocking for me. I really thought the way they were heating up Steve Maclin, the way he's kind of he was given the opportunity and he rose to the occasion. And I thought Steve Maclin was killing it. That match against PCO was brutal, fun, but it left us with some kind of iconic imagery. Him holding the title, all bloody. I'm like, man, they're heating this guy up for Nick Aldis at Slammiversary. And then Alex Shelley beats him at Against All Odds. I was shocked from that regard. But like you said, being a legacy act, Alex Shelley, Motor City Machine Guns, countless tag team champions with Chris Sabin. And speaking of new champions, Chris Sabin won the X Division title the same night. So Motor City Machine Guns really kind of showing out that weekend.
Oh yeah. We'll talk about Chris Sabin in a second, but staying on Steve Maclin with his ability to rehabilitate his character. This is a short reign. He only won the title back in April at Rebellion. Obviously they had a pivot with Josh Alexander's injury. He beat Kushida and he had the defense against Rhino and PCO. It felt like he was just getting started. And of course, they can go in all these different directions. They can pivot tomorrow and do something different, but it seems like something changed. And it's okay. I'm happy with this, with Alex Shelley winning. As you said, sometimes you have to tune in. These events seem really compact together. And now it's going to give people a reason to tune into the Impact pay-per-views because you don't know what's going to happen. The biggest championship on the brand can change hands. Yeah,
you never know what's going to happen. Like you said, they have these kind of smaller tent pole. They've got their big tent poles, Bound for Glory, Slammiversary coming up this summer. But then they've got the smaller ones, the Against All Odds. I think Sacrifice is one. Do you think, when I look at this, like you said, they kind of made a a change. Does it feel abrupt to you? Do you feel like was this in the plans all along? Because to me, it feels like, I'm not saying anything negative happened or positive happened. I'm just saying something happened to kind of make this change, because I think all roads in their dream scenario, I think they wanted Josh Alexander, Nick Aldis, and then Josh Alexander goes down. They have to pivot. They put it on Macklin. I think Macklin did a lot better than maybe they even assumed. They gave the guy a shot, and now they're going to Alex Shelley, who's tried and true, but it feels like an abrupt pivot, and it also feels like almost like a transition into Nick Aldis getting that title back. If Alex Shelley beats Nick Aldis at Slammiversary, I will be absolutely shocked.
Yeah, going back to your first question, I don't think they had the roadmap, because I think the roadmap originally had Josh Alexander in the plans, and I think they've been just going month to month at this point, figuring it out as they went. And I think right now they look at the bigger matchup being Alex Shelley versus Nick Aldis at their biggest event of the year. This is their WrestleMania, so they want the best possible matchup. And you can't argue with the fact that Alex Shelley getting his first championship at Against All Odds for the first time. He's been with the company for a very long time, and he's been a guy that you can rely on, tag team or not. He's a guy he's been there. So him getting his moment at Against All Odds, it would feel stunted if we're at Slammiversary and he loses to Nick Aldis. And this is the kind of the conversation we're having across different promotions, where we talked about Cody not winning against Roman. And I think there's intrigue here, because everyone's going to be expecting Alex Shelley to lose, but there's that sliver of doubt, because if Macklin went into Slammiversary, you're like, oh, absolutely losing. But now with Shelley, can he lose in a month? That seems way too short for his first reign. So I'm fascinated to see where it goes. But this is essentially what's going to be the main event. They didn't officially announce it yet, but you had Nick Aldis earning the shot earlier in the night in that 8-4-1 match. So we'll talk about that in a second, but it seems it's going to be here, Slammiversary, their biggest event of the year. And Alex Shelley versus Nick Aldis, that moves me a little bit further than Steve Macklin, Nick Aldis.
Yeah, because like you said, now there's the added intrigue of, do you stunt Alex Shelley's big moment at Against All Odds by having him drop the title a month later? So that doubt creeps into your head. Maybe he does beat Aldis. And with Macklin, even though he picked up the ball and ran a touchdown and did great, I feel like that might be even more predictable. Like, yeah, Aldis is going to come in and take that title. But I don't know, man. It's interesting, because on one hand, I'm like, yeah, what a good moment for the fans to see such a TNA / Impact original having that world championship moment. But there is a part of me that's kind of like, if anyone can have that moment and then drop it a month later, it's a guy who's kind of made his bones in the tag team division. Like, his legacy, he's had singles matches, he's had great runs, but he's never held the world title, and he is known for the Motor City Machine Guns within this promotion. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's just kind of a stepping stone to get that title in Aldis.
Yeah, this gives more credence to those number one contenders matches, because when he won that title shot back at Under Siege, I feel like we just brushed over it, thinking it's just another step for Macklin on this path to eventually facing that big bad at the end of the path, which would be Nick Aldis. And here we are talking about, wow, I mean, they threw a pipe bomb into the plans, and that's what you live for. And you can make the best of the scenario where not ideal. Josh Alexander was hurt. He's a guy that you were leaning on. Historic run, probably the best world champion outside of Roman Reigns in the last couple of years. I mean, he was crushing it. In my opinion, took the Impact Championship to a new level that it hadn't been in quite some time. So credit to Josh Alexander, credit to Impact as far as their creative team has gone. They've taken it to a new level. And their main event scene, you talk about Steve Macklin losing and it was a short reign. At this point, though, you can credit them for having a huge upper crust of this main event that has really their main event caliber talent that isn't just, gone are the days of the XWE guys just coming in and running roughshod. They have legit main eventers that could potentially leave this company and be, on the same level as AEW and WWE. I really feel the same way. The title has been raised that far up.
That's what I love about the way they've kind of handled the booking of this title. If you look, like, Josh Alexander, Alex Shelley, Nick Aldis, all in the mix. They're all OGs. They're not WWE. I mean, you could say Macklin, but I think that's a stretch. I mean, he wrestled there, but I wouldn't say he came in with like this big, oh, this is a WWE guy. I feel like he was someone who was just kind of treading water in the low card, you know. But what's intriguing about this potential Slammiversary matchup between Aldis and Alex Shelley to me is Nick Aldis coming into this company has been presented essentially as a babyface. I mean, he hasn't been cutting real. I mean, he's got confidence, borderlining arrogance, but I wouldn't say he's cutting heel promos. And in NWA, towards the back end of his NWA run, when he held the 10 pounds of gold, he was a straight up heel. And with Alex Shelley, I feel like Alex Shelley has been like the company guy, white meat babyface. So there's a possibility we could see an abrupt Nick Aldis full heel turn, which as a fan, even back to the Magnus days, and especially his NWA run with the 10 pounds of gold, Sweet Charlotte, Aldis is best when he's the suit and tie, arrogant, Ric Flair, Harley Race type of heel.
Yeah, I think him as a heel makes the most sense, makes the most money. And I would love to see the program continue past Slammiversary because everyone's going to be expecting you to move one way, you move another way, and have Alex Shelley, you know, squeeze out a win from Nick Aldis and have him chase. Even as a heel, chasing is still better because it felt like a foregone conclusion that he's going to get a second reign. Of course, you mentioned before his first reign came under Magnus, and I do appreciate that they're mentioning that on Impact program and that they're not ignoring and pretending it didn't happen, that he is a guy returning back to Impact, that they're not trying to present him. Of course, and WWE does the same thing with Cody. It's not like they ignore that he was there, but there's a piece of wrestling companies that they want to establish this person as this main eventer because they made their bones elsewhere to reinvent themselves. But there's something to be said about him holding that championship, whether it was under a different gimmick, a different moniker, he would be a second-time champion. So I'm really looking forward to this. And I think Impact, we say it week after week, they're doing a great job of enhancing storyline, and they're consistent at this point, where we know if you're going to buy the pay-per-view, you're going to tune into Impact on a weekly basis, you're going to get consistent programming. That's going to, it's going to leave you entertained at the very least.
Absolutely, man. And this is Impact isn't pulling some Piper Niven dewdrop shit where the commentary team treats dewdrop like she's this new girl. No, man. Piper Niven was on NXT UK and we loved her. Like, acknowledge that. I loved it because when Aldis when he debuted back with Impact, he cut a promo where he was like, look, I was under a shitty gimmick before. That's gone. I'm myself now. I love that they acknowledge that. And I love it because it ties the history of the company back in. Instead of treating him like he's this new guy who's never been there, it adds levity to, and it adds weight, I should say, that he's not just a new face. He's someone who's been there. He's got legacy there. And I think it adds a lot of prestige to a world title match going into one of their top cards of the year.
So we move past it quickly, but let's talk about Chris Sabin winning the X Division Championship over Trey Miguel. And that was a big moment too. It seems like they're putting a lot of their weight behind the Motor City Machine Guns. They're going to be opening up the opening of the Impact taping this week. So they're putting a lot on them. Shelley obviously is a former X Division champion himself. That title's been around the two of them for, it seems like forever. They're guys that the division was built around, especially Chris Sabin. That guy's been, the most legendary X Division competitor. When I think X Division, I think of him. I really do.
Oh yeah.
And so them pivoting to this point where we mentioned again, going back to Josh Alexander as who was their champion. I think if he was not hurt, he would still be their world champion, but they're making the best of the scenario of having to call some audibles. And this is a fun audible to call because you would think you have the Motor City Machine Guns, you'd have them in tag team matches, and they would put on absolute bangers because they're two of the best guys to ever do it in the pro wrestling world. But now you're having them in singles competition, and you can also put them together as maybe going for tag gold while he's holding the Impact Championship and while Chris Sabin's holding the X Division Championship. It opens up different doors of possibilities that didn't exist only a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and Sabin, here's the cool thing about the Motor City Machine Guns and how they're kind of getting a spotlight right now in singles competition. And this is why it's so big for Alex Shelley to win this world title. Chris Sabin won the TNA world title.
Right.
Like he did. It was one reign, but the guy did win it. Alex never won the big belt. So for him to win that big belt, I think it shows that they appreciate these two guys. And we've seen them, Motor City Machine Guns have been kind of adventuring outside. I think they did some matches in GCW. They've been doing some independent bookings under Motor City Machine Guns, and obviously they had those classic matches with the Young Bucks back in the day in TNA. So I think it's fun for them to finally get their shine. And guys watching, if you're watching and you're a fan of the tavern and some of the stuff we put out, let us know if you would be interested in an Impact show. If we were to have a streaming Impact Wrestling show where we cover the week, it's something we're kind of mulling around, but we'd love to hear from our loyal listeners. Is that something you guys would like?
So before we move on from Shelley and Sabin, just so you know, September 16th, Remarkable Wrestling own the night in Deer Park. We're going to have maybe the Impact champion and also maybe the X Division champion being live and in person. So support Remarkable Wrestling. They're going to be there. So awesome to hear. I felt like it was apropos and I kind of willed into existence watching this happen. So would love to be able to announce that, Alex Shelley, whoever he winds up wrestling at Remarkable, and Chris Sabin, whoever he winds up wrestling at Remarkable, maybe they'll have that gold with them.
Oh, dude, how cool would that be? your home promotion to get to see Motor City Machine Guns with that X title, that or the Impact World title. That'd be great.
It would be phenomenal. And, the lock and chains from June until September, but either way, looking forward to it. I think they're doing a training seminar.
Did we lose you, Ace?
You got me now?
Yeah. You cut out for a second. You froze up for a second.
Okay. What did you last hear? I was just saying they're doing a training seminar right before the show.
That training seminar was the last thing I heard.
Oh yeah. So that's pretty much it. So they're going to be doing that. So yeah, stay tuned to Remarkable_Wrestling on Instagram, my page at Acefield Retro for more information for right now, the current Impact champion and also the current X Division champion coming to town, Deer Park, New York.
Yeah, you got to go support these guys. These are legends. I mean, these are legends. There are legends outside of WWE, guys, like and New Japan and AEW. Like there's guys plying the trade and kind of scorching that path for companies like Impact. And these guys, Motor City Machine Guns, all time. I mean, they're a top 20 tag team in my opinion, all time. They're so revolutionary in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And they continue to tear it up and set new bars, and they're helping the younger teams out there as well. So they continue to give back. And we talked about this before where I forget what topic we were talking about. Maybe it was the Goldberg farewell tour or something. We talk about legends leaving the wrestling world better than where they found it. Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin are the utmost examples of giving back to the wrestling business while contributing in the ring and also giving their knowledge elsewhere. And you can tell that the Impact roster benefits from having them there consistently. So can't say enough nice things about Shelley and Sabin, who they've been doing it for a long time and they continue to do it very, very well.
Absolutely, man.
So let's talk about story number 2.
Big story 2.
Here we are. Big story number 2. Blake Christian captured the GCW championship at GCW Cage of Survival 2. And the thing is, we last left you guys, and of course, Chad mentioned it, our coffee recordings. We did not have the results of Cage of Survival 2. We knew that Masha would be taking on Rina Yameshita at Cage of Survival 2. Obviously, Rina had won the Tournament of Survival the night before. She got a title shot against Masha. We figured that they would have an all-out brawl, which they did. We figured they would leave each other bloody, which they did. But what we didn't account for was that Blake Christian had his grab the brass ring title shot that he earned at Joey Janela's Spring Break 7 at WrestleMania weekend. He used this opportunity to take a wounded Masha Slamovich to task, curb stomped her into the ground. An impromptu match, won him the gold, absolute heat, throwing beers in the ring. Everything that went down there was reminiscent of the heat that Cardona got. He's been getting consistent heat to the point where it's tongue in cheek at this point. Everyone respects Blake Christian. They love him. And that's what the Showboat feels like they have to do now. It's like, when you get a one ball at Wrigley Field, they hit it. You have to throw it back at this point. When you're at a GCW event, you have to boo Blake Christian, but you can't help but feel happy for the dude. This feels like a long time coming and the culmination of what was a long time story.
How did we not see this?
I don't know.
I mean, we're talking about, Masha's probably going to retain, but it would be cool if they just pushed all their chips on the table with Rena, because she had just, won the Tournament of Survival. She had the epic match to take the Ultraviolent Championship off of Alex Colon, Ultraviolent legend, deathmatch legend. And I completely forgot about the grab the brass ring. When Blake cashed it in, I was like, of course that's what they're going to do. And we've been calling, if you've been a long time viewer of the Tavern, back when we were doing the GCW show, we were calling for Blake to be the guy to take it off of Moxley.
Right.
And, they went back to Nick Gage. So for Blake to get this, I think it's beyond overdue. I mean, I thought it happened in a really cool way. And I think now it's like, okay, you got that heat. He built up that heat. But it was really cool seeing one of the guys who's really blood, sweat, and tears of the company. You forget, like, Blake was ripping it up prior to being signed by WWE. And then he goes off and does that thing, gets cut during the pandemic, goes back on the indie scene, starts plying his trade again. He's popping up in ROH. He's been on AEW television. Obviously GCW is, the kid's crushing it. My question, Ace, is when and why did this heat truly start? Now, I know there was like the Cora Jade breakup with Braun Breaker, and the GCW faithful was kind of giving him shit for that. But like, where did this really start steamrolling, and where did this heat come from?
Felt like it was exclusive to the Showboat in Atlantic City for a bit. And it's kind of that way, because if they go to Detroit or LA, he doesn't nearly get as much heat unless he's looking for it, because we know how good of a heel he can be. Because people, if you only watch ROH, AEW, you don't really see the dynamic nature his character can be, because this guy can play a crowd better than a lot of young wrestlers out there. So if you're looking for a way to get heat, watch Blake Christian. But going back to it, it felt like the origins was momentum based, where he had left to go to AEW. Because when I saw him at All Out Weekend in Chicago, he wasn't getting that level of heat. People were still chanting All Heart. They were behind everything he's doing. They were singing along to his theme song. So something changed in between that. And I really think it was his consistent time spent on the main roster. He sold out. But I think it's all, like I said, tongue in cheek, where everyone's playing a role and he's leaning into it now. He's doing the suck it. He's absolutely tearing it up. As you mentioned, it's hard for anyone to deny the athletic ability this guy has. He's beyond gifted in the ring. He's wise beyond his years. As I mentioned, his ability to work that crowd there. And I look at it this way too. When people say, you've lived in New York, Chad, you can drive in New York, you can drive anywhere. You can work a GCW crowd and sustain the heat with them and survive that level of heat, where these guys, there's really no barricades. They can just grab you and do whatever. He's like batted with a weighted bat at this point. Like, now going elsewhere, I can do anything. He's working this crowd magically.
Yeah. I remember when he had the All Heart, and he had just a showering of support when he came back during the pandemic and came back onto the independent scene. People loved that he was back. He had a brief moment. I remember they shot a pre-tape kind of package with him where I believe he had a mask, and he spent some time as Blackheart instead of All Heart, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And we were thinking, is this a heel turn? And then it didn't lead to that, but then they started giving him shit. And like you said, the GCW fans love and respect Blake, but they're being great wrestling fans, because they're booing who they need to boo, they're cheering who they need to cheer, and it makes for a fun show. But Blake, man, I really hope we get some iconic matches and feuds with him with this title. I think I think there's a part of me that thinks, you could elevate people like Jordan Oliver into feuds with this guy. I would love to see, they always kind of steer away from this. And I think it's because he's I would say one of the foundational pillars of the company, but I think a Blake Christian, Joey Janela feud would be money.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be great, but I'm excited to see what they have in store for this kid.
Yeah, someone who watches GCW quite religiously, what they do suffer from is telling streamlined stories. It feels like each event is one off and they're just living for that night. And there are, of course, stories that transcend, as we mentioned, Blake Christian's chance and trying to get the championship. That's lived across all these different events. The Cardona story, he shows up, the story at this point. But what I think is missing, and I'm not saying that to do a bloodline level, novella throughout throughout their show, but there has to be significant programming that is built around the championships. And I just don't think that exists right now. Moxley and Gage had theirs over the course of a few shows where it was career versus title. They told that story, but too often I feel like they're just putting matches together to put matches together. And that's not really, I'm not trying to be too critical because I do enjoy the product, but as far as meaning behind Masha's run, and even like, it was great because she was a female world champion. It felt awesome and it was awesome to see, but she didn't really have time to develop a meaningful story. And this Rena story, the Rena story could have had more legs to it, especially her winning the tournament of survival. And if say she would have got the championship or just come up short against Masha, maybe they could have extended it past. But I think that's the detractor of having this super indie type format where there's no guarantee that anyone's going to be available the next couple months. Like you can guarantee this person's going to be in this city and you can book them in advance, but Blake Christian has other obligations. Masha has other obligations. You have all these other people that they're making their living elsewhere as well. And that's kind of where, being that super indie where it feels free and everyone can flow elsewhere, it kind of comes back to bite you a bit because there's no guarantee who will be available on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or bi-weekly, whatever it winds up being. Having Masha, her utmost priority is Impact. Like that's what it is. Unfortunately for GCW, that's what it is. Blake Christian, same to be said. Yes, he's in a trio, a jobber trio in ROH, but at the end of the day, that paycheck has to be larger and has to be his priority because there's more of a ceiling there.
100%. And to touch on what you initially floated, I agree wholeheartedly on the storyline situation in GCW. I love GCW too. I'm highly entertained by it, but a lot of times that company feels like they are an independent company and they are booking for the city that they are in. They are not as focused on the through line of week to week storytelling. They put on so many shows though, and especially with the package, you can get all of the GCW events through Fight TV now. I think it would be a nice switch up for them to, if you're a GCW fan and you're buying that package on Fight TV to watch GCW, you will follow the storylines. And I really think there's a way for them to do that and have a little more storytelling in their big matches and still entertain whatever city they're traveling to put on an incredible show. I think there's a way to do that. I think that's one of that to me is their, I don't want to say Achilles heel. I just think it's their weak link, and it doesn't take anything away. I mean, they are the independent for me. Like they are must see, especially deathmatch wrestling. Like they're the tops. But man, if you added that storytelling, it would just take it to another level. Even and you could do it by not feeling like you're turning your back on the hardcores who've been there since day one. I have a feeling like the hardcores would appreciate that too.
Yeah, I would love to see Blake Christian get a meaningful story, but you don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, because what makes GCW this larger than life independent that feels like anything can happen is the fact that they do what they do, where the talent floats in, and you might have Vikingo one month and 1 month he won't be there. And same thing with even sometimes there's people that are consistently featured on the shows. They have other bookings that will take priority over it for them. And you mentioned the amount of shows too. They're living and breathing by the venue. Like you said, when they go to Harpo's, they're putting a certain type of show on. When they come to New York. They're putting on a certain type of show. And of course, the Showboat has a certain aesthetic to it as well, which they're no longer doing the carousel room, but they're still in that warehouse looking to add Tournament of Survival in. But yeah, I mean, we're nitpicking here because they're living in a niche that is their own. We can't put them in the same box as the big promotions because they'll never be that. But I just think Blake, as far as his character development as being the GCW champion, I would love to see him have significant story where you have a couple events in a row where you have something brewing with somebody. It would be awesome. As you mentioned, Jordan Oliver would be an awesome story to tell. Have Blake become this absolute menacing heel, and you can get a lot of sympathy from Jordan Oliver. That guy, the GCW audience loves him to death. So
yeah, and
there's potential there.
Yeah, Jordan Oliver's put in his work too. They love him because he is a road dog for that company. And
yeah,
I just love when you give a guy like Blake Christian a spot like this. It's a prime time situation where you can elevate another young talent. Like they're in a spot where they could truly kind of revolutionize that top tier. They have so many guys. I'm even thinking of the Mance Warners, the Matt Justice, all of those guys that are always there for you. I wouldn't be against them. I don't know what AJ Gray's been up to, but I always loved AJ Gray. Having him up in that, upper echelon, that would be a fun feud. They can elevate a lot of new guys with Blake and kind of round out the top of their card and give us some new faces. I feel like Mox has kind of went away. They've always got Cardona to tap into. Nick Gage, I think he's kind of taken a step back as more of like a figure, kind of an icon of the promotion, but not so much in that world title picture per se, but the options are unlimited for what they can do as far as elevating their roster that they do have. And when we say roster, obviously the beauty of GCW is they're not locking anyone into exclusives. It's just, it is a hub for anyone who's anyone in indie wrestling who wants to come play in the world of Game Changer Wrestling. And the floating in and out is what makes this company beautiful.
Yeah, the sandbox to play in is great because we've seen guys from Ernest the Cat Miller wrestle Joey Janela and
Scotty Too Hottie,
like X-Pac. Like there's been enough guys that have come in and out to tell stories on a one-off. But I think someone like Blake Christian, you have potential here, and I just think that's the compliment we should give them. The top layer of consistent talent that appear on GCW on pretty much an every show basis deserves a story that could really help them elevate themselves, because then their stock goes up and the GCW championship goes up as well. As far as stock goes, we talk about first big story, rehabilitating the Impact Championship to make it feel on the level of world championships. I would like that to be said about the GCW championship, where Blake Christian can bring that to AEW or ROH television, where it's like the AEW fandom will be like, damn, that dude's a world champion. That's a big deal.
I agree. I think Blake Christian walking out on Ring of Honor television with the GCW world title, that's awesome. That not only does it obviously help GCW get some eyes that maybe aren't tuned in, but I think it elevates Blake Christian on Ring of Honor. Hey, this guy's a champion over here. Why do you think it is, Ace, that, like, say when Mox was the champion, did we ever see him bring that GCW world title out?
No, they never did. And we talked about this on the GCW show week after week, especially Mox, just the flexibility that Tony Khan had showed to allow you to use one of, if not the biggest star he has in the company that a lot rides on. You let him go in there. And of course it's Moxley's choice. That's probably in his contract. I want to be able to do blood sport. I want to be able to do the death matches and scratch that itch when I want to. But on the other side of it, Brett Lauderdale should be like, well, I want my title being shown on that, on the roster, because we're putting a lot of stock behind Jon Moxley and we're giving him a lot here and letting him do the thing and we're keeping him safe and all that stuff. So I don't know. It feels weird, especially where AAA gets to show their championships. New Japan Pro Wrestling shows their championships. I understand from Blake Christian on the perspective we mentioned, he is featured right now in a 6-way team that is a 3-man team that is pretty much an enhancement level jobber team. So it would be weird to have a world champion in that group losing week after week. But that being said, I guess that's the risk you take where you put a championship on a guy who's elsewhere being booked poorly. So
is it, I don't want to denigrate GCW because I hold them. I've always kind of said, I look at them as they're the ECW in the equation. If AEW is the WCW of the time, they're kind of the ECW of the time. I don't want to denigrate them by saying this, but do you feel like a Tony Khan Tony Khan's who we got to play with. So I'll just say, do you think Tony Khan looks at GCW as they're a level below an Impact in NWA? Because we've seen Tony allow the Impact titles come out. We've seen Tony allow the NWA Women's Championship was out when Serena Deeb went and won it and Thunder Rosa brought it to the company. So do you feel like he's looking at GCW as purely an independent promotion that doesn't have national TV exposure? Like, could that be the reason?
Yeah, I think Tony respects wrestling first and foremost, but look at this as an example. This is precedent setting. Swerve Strickland was the Defy champion. They're going to be defending the Defy championship allegedly on Dynamite when Nick Wayne makes his debut in July, but Kenta just beat Swerve at the last Defy event, so we'll see what happens. But they don't show those titles on screen. Like if someone holds a Defy championship, if they hold a Progress championship, if they have done anything else, I guess there's two boxes. It's main promotions and independent, super or not. You can't just show up. You may be, how many titles does Cardona have? He wouldn't show up on Impact with every championship he owns, I guess, because it doesn't fit the canon. I think that's simply what it is, because you open that door for GCW, that means that all the other promotions, Black Label Pro, they're going to want their title shown on TV. So I guess it's Pandora's box that Tony doesn't want to open.
Yeah, I think we're from their perspective, they're probably boxing companies into the majors and the minors, the minor leagues, the major leagues. And I see that to some, I get that. Like ASW here in Charleston, I wouldn't imagine Cardona, he's the champ, but I don't think Cardona is going to walk out on Impact with the ASW world title. It's just not going to happen. It's not recognized. It's a more local, regional thing. But GCW is in a weird spot for me because I feel like they're teetering. They're not just the minors to me. I feel like GCW is somewhere in between the majors and the minors. They're in this. I would love to see it. I would buy a GCW title showing up on AEW or ROH. Like it would hold weight to me more so than just like any other small regional independent.
Especially when Moxley was a champion and you showed Nick Gage on your screen. Maybe that, as we're pulling the thread, maybe that plays a part with the advertisers were very upset about the pizza cutters and the Domino's ad and all that stuff. So maybe that plays a part. Maybe the, WBD doesn't want GCW being shown on screen now. Maybe that plays a huge part because it's a gateway where someone types in those three letters and they're going to associate it with AEW, better or worse. It's going to be associated with the brand. So maybe it's something like that. Someone should just straight up ask Tony Khan. I feel like he would answer that question. There's no, especially when Moxley was champion, that's the biggest thing. I understand why Blake wouldn't show up with it, but I think when Moxley was champion and you had all these guys showing up with different championship belts and you had Omega collecting his championship belts, Moxley showing up while he was in parallel, the AEW world champion would be awesome. So
yeah, man. And I'm wanting to say when he held the GCW world title during that reign, he was also New Japan's United States title and he showed up with that title.
Right. Good point.
So it's like that right there to me is enough to be like, oh, so you look at this promotion as on this level and you put the other one a little below it.
I guess similar to last week, you and I are stuck on the semantics of the belts where everyone else just kind of looks at it as he's the GCW champion and he's going to be a certain stature in our promotion, but not the same elsewhere. And I guess to me, I would not look at it differently unless Moxley was their champion. I think that's what I was getting stuck on. Because at one point, the bar was raised where the AEW world champion was also the GCW champion. Yeah. I understand Blake Christian now is the GCW champion, but he's not equivalent to MJF. Like, it's just not,
Right.
it doesn't exist like that.
Right.
But so it's always a fascinating conversation. But congrats to Blake Christian. I think it's awesome. A good decision. Long time coming. Hopefully we get some more meaningful story. And I would even love more story with Masha. Like, let two of those guys go at it, because I think that they could tell a meaningful story.
Yeah, I'm all in for. I hope this isn't a sign that Masha's kind of going more Impact, which that's good too. We get to watch her either way, but I really love her work in GCW. I think that's she can show a side of herself there that she maybe doesn't get to go as deep into an Impact. So her and Blake would rip it up. All props to Blake for finally capturing that gold, because he's been in that company busting his ass and showing out for a long time. So it was very cool to see.
So we'll talk about it in the quick hitters after we get through this, the third story. But Masha setting the tone along with the other GCW alum for what's happening on the big WWE and the Fed. They're copying a little bit what Masha and Rena have normalized a long time ago, what they're doing in GCW. But stay tuned for that. Let's get to big story number 3.
Big story 3.
We have, for the Yeehaw marks in the building, we have a good old-fashioned bull rope match on tap for SummerSlam. And of course, it's not official. The next matchup between Cody Rhodes and Brock Lesnar could have an added stipulation. It's been talked about being a bull rope match, and we'll talk about why it makes sense. It does make a lot of sense to do this with the history of the Cody Rhodes and the Rhodes family at large. But in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Meltzer reported that there's been a lot of talk about adding a stipulation to Rhodes Lesnar's next match, which of course will be their third together. One of the ideas considered is a bull rope match. Obviously, as I mentioned before, not official. There's multiple other ideas on the table. As if you guys are not familiar with what a bull rope match is, it's a strap match where competitors are tied to each other by, you guessed it, a bull rope. So the rules vary. We've seen different variations of the rules, where go back to the Eddie Guerrero JBL match, where JBL captured the W Championship for the first time. You had to touch all 4 corners. There's also, you're just tied together. It can end in pinfall or submission. Dealer's choice. I'd imagine they wouldn't do the 4 corners. It takes a little bit of the drama out, and you want a clean pinfall for Cody going into the fall. They're 1-1 right now. We need a tiebreaker here, and you want a decisive finish here in Detroit. Big stadium show. They've completely kept Roman and Cody separate, so that's a whole other conversation. But your thoughts on, first and foremost, Cody and Brock 3 at SummerSlam. Do you think it's a big enough match to host as a sub-main event? And a bull rope as the match, does it take it over the top for you?
Yeah, I mean, you got to do I like what they're doing with both of them. I mean, bull rope is fitting, first and foremost. I mean, it's honoring, it's a tip of the cap to Dusty, which, this Cody run has always felt like Dusty's ghost is hovering over it. I feel like, it's all built on, I want to win the title that my dad never won. And, with the titles being flopped around, you could debate if he's going to win, if that's true. But
right,
as far as the gimmick itself, this third match 1000% deserves a gimmick. I mean, like, this is the blow off match, at least perceivably to me. We've had the first 2 matches. You're getting the third match. It's at a huge, arguably their second or third of biggest event of the year. I mean, there's Mania, Rumble, and SummerSlam are the big 3 for me. Obviously, Survivor Series rounds that out, but that's in the 4th spot.
Right.
You can argue who's more important, SummerSlam or the Rumble. But yeah, it's got all the makings. It's the third match. It's got the big event. Now you throw the gimmick on it. I love the bull rope. I love that it's tied to Dusty's lineage. I know there was rumors that Cody had pitched a dog collar match. I think that's a little too brutal for WWE. I just can't see them going that route. Cody's dog collar match against Brody Lee was awesome in AEW.
Yeah,
I love that match. I'm down for it. I've had issues along the way with this whole storyline, but as far as just a bull rope match between these two, sounds like a hell of a good time.
So to catch you guys up, Rhodes defeated Lesnar when they faced off at Backlash. Lesnar won their next meeting at Night of Champions. In storyline, Cody Rhodes was battling through that broken arm, and the finish of the bout was Rhodes passing out in the Kimura lock. So this will be the third and final match. Hopefully ends the feud for good. And if you guys know your history, the bull rope matches happen across different promotions, across different times. But the Texas bull rope match, the last one in WWE, was the Great American Bash 2007. Randy Orton wrestled none other than Dusty Rhodes. Wasn't Dusty's last match. He wound up finishing his active career at this point, obviously well past his prime, finished his active career in a 6-man tag match. Dusty dominated most of this match. Obviously, Randy gets the win. But how fitting would it be to have this match that I don't think this match was invented by Dusty. Let's not get anyone mistaken here. But when you think of a bull rope match, you think of Dusty Rhodes. I feel like you have to. I think that type of match fits that old aesthetic of, you can picture the cowboy boots and the jeans. And I think it's very fitting and apropos to paying tribute to the broken arm. This run has been kind of a love letter to his father. And some people, they poo-poo it and they don't appreciate it. But at the end of the day, Cody Rhodes is doing a beautiful job of paying tribute to his father, who did a lot for the wrestling business. And they're reinventing a lot of how Dusty was perceived in WWE canon, because all throughout they can wax poetic and talk about lovingly the polka dots, but we know the story. We don't have to get into it. But I think right now he is doing a good job of making people realize that the credentials of Dusty Rhodes far surpass what was presented on screen for the time he had done an active in-ring career. And I think they've done a good job posthumously now. At this point, unfortunately, he has not able to see the fruit from the tree of all the people he helped. And you saw some of those posts as well when he passed away, because the anniversary just passed, of the influence that he's had on that original NXT crop, from the Sami Zayns, the Kevin Owens, the Sasha Banks, and the list goes on. His, we keep saying, as far as Sabin and Shelley, the first story, he gave back to the business well after he was done in the ring. And I love the Cody tribute, but this would be a fitting end to a feud. I just hope they make it decisive, because I think Cody needs a decisive win, which is why I say they can't do the 4-post thing. They have to make sure when he pins him, Brock is a bloody mess. Brock is decisively beaten, whether it be a crossroads or whatever it takes to beat him. It needs to be decisive, and Cody Rhodes needs to feel big going into the push through the fall and eventually the Rumble, where I think he should win it again and take on Roman. Like, this is the next reboot. We're putting him on this is a stovetop. They put him on simmer for a bit, but we have to turn up the boil soon. No better way than having him beat Brock 2-1 in a series and then beat him decisively in that third and final match while you're tied to the monster. That's a big deal. That's symbolism of that, being tied to the monster, not running away. Nobody says that about Brock Lesnar facing him one-on-one.
I agree. Tied to the monster. I mean, the visual of it's going to be amazing. I think to your first point about Dusty being kind of known, the bull rope being his thing, it's not like he created it, but it became his. It was so much his that when Cody was in AEW, behind the scenes in AEW, we as wrestling fans in WWE, we've known the place where Vince or Tony Khan or any of those, the producers set, it's been known as the gorilla position. In AEW, they dubbed it the Dusty position, and they had a bull rope at that position to honor Dusty. I remember seeing Cody seeing it for the first time when they did that. They named it the Dusty position. I thought that was very cool. Also, you got to think about the bull rope is, they can tee this up very easily in storyline. Brock's been rocking that cowboy gimmick for a minute. Yeah. Cody's got the tie to Dusty, obviously. So it's very easy for both of those characters to come to the bull rope. And I do think WWE will book it where Cody's standing tall and Lesnar is laid out. Brock doesn't have to be protected here, and I think Brock is good about when it's time for him to truly put a guy over. Nobody does it better than Brock Lesnar, and they've strung this along. We got a good trilogy of matches in this storyline. I think, honestly, like at this point, this is the jumping off point to me. SummerSlam is when you don't have to go right into Roman, obviously, but like sights are set. Sights are set on Roman for Cody. If he's standing tall with that bull rope, Lesnar laid out at the end of the rope, I feel like everybody in the crowd in Detroit is going to be thinking, okay, this is the first stop. I guess my question, if we're just doing hypotheticals, Ace, like, do you have him call out? Do you have him stake his claim for Mania where they can circumvent Cody having to win the Rumble again? Do they use the Rumble winner to set up the match with, the title that Rollins holds now? Do you use the Rumble for that? Or do you have Cody run the tables again and win the Rumble again? Which way would you go?
I think probably what you said about going after the World Heavyweight Championship, because they're trying their best. Maybe it's a failed effort, but they're trying to put a lot of stake behind this title, make it feel important, and wouldn't feel important if someone won the Rumble. The first opportunity they have, they go for the other championship. So I think the writing is on the wall that no matter what, they're going for that championship to take on Rollins, maybe somebody else. But until that point, they're definitely going after the World Heavyweight Championship. I would kind of like if they just stuck the flag in the ground and let us know where we're going come April 2024. It's going to be in Philly. It's going to be Cody versus Roman. And then everybody knows the goalpost and we can all live in this sandbox and play in different directions, but knowing eventually this is going to happen. And they're living on two different brands. It's a brand split, I guess, but there is enough to do. And we're going to talk about in a second. I mean, I might as well bring it up now about Money in the Bank and the quick hitters, that potentially they're planting seeds to have him wrestle Dom in a mini program, because obviously Brock has a limited schedule. Maybe they're just doing little checkpoints for Cody Rhodes, and Dominic Mysterio is the perfect spot here. Has me disappointed that maybe Dom won't be involved in the Money in the Bank, because I think he'd be a nice obnoxious
he'd be a great
heel
addition
with the Money in the Bank. I still stick with LA Knight, but Dom as the Money in the Bank holder, even if he doesn't cash in the title successfully, I think it's funny to picture him holding it or Rhea holding it for him. Or her cashing it in on his behalf, and whatever. We'll talk about that in a second.
Right.
But I think the biggest thing here is patching this story together and make it make sense. What's Roman going to do? Obviously, he has stuff to sort out with his family, with the Usos and Paul Heyman and Solo, and that needs to be sorted.
But this could add to that. This could add, it's not like WWE hasn't done this before. I mean, Cena and The Rock announced a year out.
The day after WrestleMania, the year after their first match. Yeah.
So like we're only SummerSlam to Mania. I would have no problem if they announced right after SummerSlam, this is what we're getting. All roads lead to that. Doesn't mean we have to have both of them cutting promos on each other for 8-9 months. I think it adds to the dissension of the bloodline. When they're dealing with it all crumbling around Roman and he's dealing with all the infighting of his family, and then he has this looming guy who wants to take everything he has, I think that could add a nice little element to it. Because the one critique I've had in all of this, and it's made me second guess them making Cody lose, as far as the story they're telling right now, I think Cody with the title in this Lesnar feud would mean more.
Yeah.
And Roman and the fallout of the bloodline does not need the title. That I think it's evident to me, but there's ways where obviously they can flip that any minute. Both stories are really entertaining, so it's not hurting it, but I don't think Roman would need the title for what's going on right now. And I think that title, if that title was on Cody and he's in this feud and he had the broken arm, it would mean so much more. I don't know. That's just nitpicking though, but yeah.
I think a lot of ways the title is going to inhibit the stories they can tell on the Roman side with the bloodline, because if you are having Jay or Jimmy feud single-handedly with Roman and the title's not on the line, that feels a little discombobulated. And of course, to me, you don't put the title on either one of those guys.
No.
So it muddies the water a little bit about what you can do, because there'd be at least some suspended belief where Jimmy or Jay could pin Roman without the title involved. And maybe they can do that in tag match format. But he hasn't been pinned since he was pinned all the way back in 2020 against Baron Corbin. You don't want to waste the pin on the Usos. There's so much at stake here, which is what we talked about with the Jade Cargill stuff, with this undefeated streak. There's so much on the line where everyone is zeroed in on every decision you make. And there's not a lot of wiggle room for storytelling with Roman, which it's a blessing for them that he's not involved on every month's pay-per-views because they'd run out of steam. They can't really figure out a way. How do you keep the title on him and keep him interesting? I think the best thing is keeping him off TV for a little bit and have him just have Paul Heyman be his mouthpiece. And then he shows up when he shows up, and that keeps it fresh.
Yeah, that's the only way they do it. Like if this was an every show guy, Bloodline would have ran its course. They are benefiting from his kind of light schedule that he worked into his contract the last time they negotiated. Like it's keeping it fresh, and they're getting to stretch it out long.
So we'll see what happens with this SummerSlam story with going forward. We don't know if the bull rope stipulation will be the final stipulation they choose, but I can't imagine what other stipulation they could choose that would be more appropriate that Cody would get behind and have the visual that you're looking for as we get towards this push of Cody Rhodes' second attempt at taking the title from Roman Reigns, which we all feel like that's where they're going, because SummerSlam was that other benchmark where we said, all right, Cody in Detroit. I think everyone was saying that after WrestleMania. It didn't happen at WrestleMania. It's going to happen at Detroit because it's another stadium show. Well, you're wrong. And now we're moving towards WrestleMania. And we could be sitting the night after WrestleMania 40 being like, well, it's going to be next WrestleMania. But
right.
Here we are sowing the seeds of figuring out, will it be just as good? And, shout out to you guys on the debate. I listened to it this morning about talking about Cody and can you make it just as big? And I'm sure they're up for the task, but it's hard once you get something to a steaming boil where it's about to topple over, and that energy in that crowd, they're really doubling down that Philadelphia will be just as hot and behind Cody, because you always run the risk where it tips the other way, where these smart fans feel like they've been too exposed, where all of a sudden Cody is not as appealing to them anymore, and you lose that moment and it's gone forever.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, just kind of taking the temperature of the room, Cody doesn't feel, I mean, he's obviously over with the crowd, over with the fans, over with the kids, especially. But as far as just the temperature of the hardcore wrestling room, he doesn't feel as hot as he was. And he's still popular.
How could you be though? Like he was,
right.
I don't think there's anyone been as hot and unanimously behind him. I don't think there was anyone watching at home that wasn't just rooting for that story, especially after he just hugged -1. And it felt like this party. And then boom, for just the finish of whatever it was, the 1,000 days, the shock value, just the unpredictability factor of anything can happen any night, pal. That was done in lieu of that. So here we are trying to pick up the pieces, and we're still watching, we're still waiting. And I hope it pays off, because if it's worth the wait, we'll all sit here, open the windows for the Crows here at the All Elite Farms and let them in. I'll let them in all day. I'll eat crow all day if it's right.
Oh, I will too. I hope they, and I think they can. It's just, will they, and how can they do it? I don't know how they can get him that hot again. I'm sure they can. We'll see. I hope they do.
So let's get to the quick hitters and go through some of these other stories. We got some big things to break down, so stay tuned. Quick hitters. All right, so this happened early last week, but I want to definitely touch upon it. Unfortunately, as everyone heard, paying tribute to the Iron Sheik, one of the longtime heels across wrestling, part of the pop culture at two different points of his life. We talked about that a little bit, and best known for feuds, Hogan, Sergeant Slaughter. He passed away on 6/7 in his home in Fayetteville, Georgia. We can obviously talk about his Hall of Fame induction in 2005. He was involved in the NWA Hall of Fame class of 2008. I mean, he's all across and well-deserved. He was voted most underrated in the Wrestling Observer newsletter in 1980. Most notably in WWE, WWF, he ended Bob Backlund's 1470 reign with the WWF Championship when he defeated him in MSG, and of course, dropping it, symbolizing the start of Hulkamania. We've talked about this extensively throughout the week, and deservedly so. Iron Sheik is this great pop culture icon that transcends wrestling at this point. But as far as other people paying tribute, we saw different wrestlers talking about their perspective and different portions of their lives. AEW tweeted something about it, classy tweet from AEW. We had Miro with an interesting tweet about how Sheik influenced him, and I thought it's worth reading. He said, Iron Sheik had an influence in my career back in FCW. I had no idea about speaking on the microphone. Then I went and I studied his ability, and that's where things started to turn. Legit wrestler, pro wrestler, and amazing entertainer, RIP. So obviously FCW is the old developmental system days before NXT. But it was nice to see the tribute being paid to a guy like Iron Sheik, where just because you didn't watch him growing up because he wasn't a guy that was around, it shows the ability, guys that grew up now watching tapes and now us being able to check out the network. It's not about certain eras you grow up on. It's about who kind of shaped your fandom as a wrestling. Iron Sheik did that for a lot of people.
100%. He was a little before my time. I remember, the toys, the LJNs of him, and growing up and seeing that and seeing the clips of Hogan beating him. And honestly, I was shocked when he passed. I was shocked to find out that he only reigned for 28 days after Bob Backlund, because his legend was so much bigger in my head as a young fan that when I found out that he only held it for about a month and then Hulkamania kicked off, essentially a transitional champion from Backlund to Hogan. WWF at the time was a straight babyface factory. Like, they were pushing the babyface and churning out heels for the babyface to defeat. So it just goes to show you that his character and everything hit a lot bigger than what the company even gave him. It's not like he was this long reigning champion that Hogan had to defeat. It was today. Like, think of that today. If there was a guy who held the title for 28 days, you wouldn't look at him like that. But Sheik was such a charismatic guy. Just speaking for myself, he lived larger in my head than he actually was from that WWF championship run. But I mean, his feuds with Slaughter, that was bigger than the Hogan feud, the boot camp match. I mean, all of that, like, and even like his post wrestling kind of legacy of saying horribly offensive, hilarious shit on Twitter, going on Howard Stern. Like, he was a great Twitter follow if you're not easily offended, but I love the Sheik, man. He's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about transitional champion, possibly the most important transitional champion in history, because and I know it's butterfly effect stuff to talk about, but if it's Bob Backlund that Hogan beats, does it have the same effect? Or if it's not an anti-American heel, like, it's a very important
100%, dude. 100%.
So he has a huge part here, and transitional champions are looked at as this negative thing, but you could make a case where he was able to establish so much dominance in 28 days as this guy who felt like he couldn't be defeated after ending Backlund's run of over 1,000 days, 1,400 to be exact. Speaks a lot to what he was able to do. And he's one of those guys too, from that era, the golden era of WWF, where you didn't even need the championship. Roddy Piper was a great example of that as well, where even if he wasn't champion, he's the largest personality on the roster. So same thing with Iron Sheik. Anytime you see him, and I know he had different pivotal runs, and they mentioned the story about him being arrested for smoking pot with Hacksaw Jim Duggan and was released, and then eventually churned up again during that WrestleMania 7 run where he's whatever his name was, but
the
he was
Triangle of Terror, Colonel Mustafa.
Yeah, Colonel Mustafa.
Yeah.
But I think even when you go back to even the gimmick battle royal WrestleMania 17, where he only won because they couldn't throw him over the top rope because he was that like kind of bewildered and not able to walk. Stories like that too. And the fact that he was able to reinvent himself post wrestling career, where there's some people that probably don't even know anything about his wrestling career, but know him from being on Twitter and know him from those ridiculous interviews. Because I say ridiculous in a loving way, because that's what they were. I mean, absolutely insane. If you're not familiar with them, go out and check it out, because this dude would say whatever's on his mind, and he made sure to let Hulk Hogan know how he felt every day of the week.
And a lot of historians, I heard Meltzer say, that this transition to Hogan from Backlund was going to happen regardless. They had, if it wasn't going to be Sheik, it was going to be it was going to be Koloff, it was going to be Snitsky, it was going to be somebody, but they settled on Sheik. And Sheik, it's like, I can't imagine anyone else but him. He was the perfect foil. You can't kick off I Am a Real American without someone like the Sheik to beat. And talking about the funny videos, the Howard Stern interviews and things like that, I saw, and he knew what he was doing, man. I saw Hulk Hogan on Stern, and Sheik called into the show and was talking all this shit to Hogan, and Stern and all the guys on Stern's crew were like just wigging out about it. And Hogan's sitting there laughing, and he's like, he's working, guys. Like this is all the work. He was like, watch we love each other. Watch this. And at the end of this huge tirade, Sheik's just trashing Hogan. Hogan just says, love you, Sheiky. He's like, love you too, buddy. Like it was all funny. Like, it was all love. Like it was all a put on, but RIP to Iron Sheik, man. One of the all-time great legends of the business.
Yeah, RIP Big Bubba. And, go out and watch an Iron Sheik match tonight. If you're not familiar with his work, go about and watch that Slaughter match. One of the bloodiest matches during that era, and great match. So
good.
So let's get into a guy not trained by the Iron Sheik, but trained by the original Sheik, Sabu. And he was on a podcast or a virtual signing with Golden Ring Collectibles. And he was asked specifically about how he got involved and what happened and how did Sabu get brought into this Adam Cole versus Chris Jericho feud. And I'm sure everyone was wondering that what's the tie? And I know Matt from Extra Cooler was on with, I believe, Tom and Mike, and they were asking, what's the tie-in? Like, what's Chris Jericho's tie-in with Sabu? And there is none really, aside from it's chaos. It's this one-off something. So the quote was from Sabu. He said, about a week before the Wednesday when I did the first appearance, and by Wednesday, the Wednesday before the Wednesday, I did the Dynamite appearance. Chris Jericho called me. He said, actually, we chatted a little bit. Then he called me back and said, hey, I got an idea. I said, okay. Then he called me on the phone and said, I got an idea. Adam Cole, me, boom, 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 this and that. The other thing, he goes, well, we'll bring you out as a surprise if you want to do it. I go, yeah. So it quickly turned into, here's Sabu on our screen. He appears at Double or Nothing, and he goes for a table, and there it is. So there's your explanation. And it just came from this virtual sign that someone clipped, and we're able to get this reason for it. So Chris Jericho made the call, and there it was.
On the flagship, we said the same thing, kind of like, where's the connection here? But this is the beautiful thing of pro wrestling, man. Sometimes you don't need it. Sometimes I just want to see a legend pop up on my Wednesday night, Monday night, Friday night wrestling show. It will blow me away. Sneed always talks about this, how 1 minute you're watching Sabu on national television on Wednesday, and then a month before he's in a tiny 12 by 12 toy store in Dunbar, West Virginia, signing autographs. Yep. Like that's the beautiful thing of pro wrestling, is these legends are so accessible, and they still get opportunities on a national scale to be honored for the legacy they've paved and left us. And when they show up, we're happy about it. You don't see that in other sports or entertainment. Like it is strictly pro wrestling that has this little element to it where you tie history in with, they can pop up on your show for a week and it's just, oh, there they are. Oh, that's awesome. I remember I popped so huge during, just to bring it back up, the Cody Brody Lee dog collar match, when they showed Greg Valentine in the crowd watching so awesome. The match. I loved it. And he was just in the audience watching, but they tied it into the Piper dog collar match that he had in '83. So I don't know. I love stuff like that, man. I love the tip of the cap to the past, and Sabu. Yeah, he had no ties to Sabu or Jericho, but it was fun seeing him.
Yeah. And also speaking to, you mentioned him being West Virginia a week ago at this point, a week ago on Thursday, he was at the Queens Brewery at Outlaw Wrestling signing autographs. And I think he came out to the ring with somebody. And that's also the good thing. We saw this happen with Carlito, where his booking rate went up and people were interested in Carlito again and put him on the spotlight. And these guys who paved the way, who came before the wrestlers here, it just puts a spotlight back on him, because we don't want to forget everything Sabu's done. Like, he deserves all the flowers for what he did throughout his ECW run, reinvigorating that type of wrestling and bringing a light to a different style of wrestling. And I'm glad he was able to get that moment in AEW. I hope it's not the last. I hope we see him in a different capacity, because I love that stuff as well. They don't have to be used. And I think we mentioned before, AEW's ability, Tony Khan specifically, their ability to showcase legends in a positive light without overexposing them. And I think the same could be said about Sabu. You talk about Sting. You even talk about how they utilized Tully Blanchard when he was there. They find a way
even
to
Rock and Roll Express when they had the
100%.
tag and Santana and Ortiz put Rock and Roll Express through some tables. Like, I love stuff like that. It's awesome.
It's just recognizing that the world of wrestling exists outside the four walls of your promotion and paying tribute. And we talk about AEW, they're establishing their history over time. So now it extends to where even though they're not associated with ECW in any way, it's almost like, you're building on the history where you're recognizing our history is wrestling's history. It's not just our 4 years of existence here. So it's beneficial for AEW too.
My last thing I'll say, if promotions don't give these spots to these guys, who will? You know what I mean? Like, companies bringing in people like that, it keeps them relevant. It keeps them in right in the front of our brain. Like, we're not forgetting about these guys. Because I'll be honest, sometimes you go to some of these WrestleCons and sign the smaller ones, and you'll see guys that you never see get any play, and there's no one at their table, and it's pretty depressing, man. You feel bad for the guys. It's like, the Ram on The Wrestler. It's that story of the guy who. So I think anytime a company can bring someone back and that new audience can be like, oh, that guy, and they go into the network or they pull up YouTube clips and watch, like, dude, that's what keeps the legend of these guys alive. And I'll never hate on a company bringing a guy out for a one-off. I always think it's awesome.
Well said. I think it's very important to pay tribute to those who came before us. They don't have a union. They don't have this pension, and they're not collecting on dividends unless they were wise with their money. They need to continue to work, and these guys gave their bodies for the business for those, especially Sabu. Sabu's, he has scars on his body from what he gave to the business. So the least they can do is have him show up and get his flowers from the fans that are around today, because we want to be able to give him that and say thank you for it and all that. But
absolutely,
moving on here to someone who was working those days in ECW with Sabu, Jerry Lynn is going to get an on-screen role with ROH and joining Stokely Hathaway. We talked about this very directly on Honor Society last week on Thursday. Just quickly here, they're going to be authority figures on ROH Weekly TV. Jerry Lynn is obviously the babyface. Stokely Hathaway is trying to portray himself as a babyface, but he's a disingenuous personality where he thinks he's doing right, but obviously has the best intentions for himself and not the talent around. So it's a nice dichotomy of choices they have to make at booking. And Colton and I talked a little bit about this. Two things. Tony Khan had way more play on Thursday's episode of ROH than he's ever had as an on-screen character, where he had a backstage segment. He came out on the stage where he's haggling with the both of them. And I felt like this was a gateway of Tony Khan getting a little love on screen and trying his hand at being an on-screen character through the proxy of Jerry Lynn and Stokely Hathaway. And I also think they're using this as a breeding ground of figuring out, do they want to have authority figures on AEW television in some capacity as a matchmaker, a Jack Tunney type. So we'll see how it works. It was pretty interesting last week to put some importance on the matches. And I think everyone understands Tony Khan's in charge. So when they mentioned Tony Khan made the match, that's good enough a lot of times. But I think Jerry Lynn and Stokely Hathaway will be included on, storylines. This is why it's happening.
I mean, Stokely Hathaway is highly entertaining, and anything that gets Jerry Lynn back to the keeping legends in the forefront of our mind. Jerry Lynn's crushing it behind the scenes. Some people may not know that. A lot of people do. I love seeing Jerry on my weekly ROH. I think it's going to be fun. It does. I never even thought about what you said, Ace, but it does make me think, like, is this kind of where they're testing out a possible authority figure for AEW television? Do you think that's a possibility? Do you think that would be good?
I think it would be a smart thing to at least test things out at ROH. And I always go back to baseball, and I know how they use the Atlantic League, the Pacific League to test the new rules prior to bringing it up to the MLB, where they did like the pitch clock and they did a whole bunch of other things there. I think they're going to use this as a breeding ground of testing to figure out what works, what doesn't. This may be one of them, because I know there's been a lot of stories that kind of get halted because there's not a authority figure on screen, where there's not the Vince McMahon, there's no Eric Bischoff, Teddy Long, And that becomes an overall trope. We always talk about that with the authority figures on screen, with literally the authority, with Triple H would open every Raw just running down the crowd and the roster, and that gets boring. But there's some level of storytelling where there's someone in charge, kayfabe wise, and making matches and being matchmaker, like the Jack Tunney with, wearing the pinky ring in front of the table during contract signings. Are we well past that because we're smart fans where you can just accept that matches are made in the back without anyone having to tell you? I guess it's just a preference of what type of wrestling you like.
I'm not against it. I mean, I don't want to see Tony as an on-screen talent, but if he's like, the kind of Oz behind the curtain, pulling the strings, and there's someone doing the bidding, or they've went almost 5 years without an authority figure on screen. If they tried their hat at it, I wouldn't be completely negative to it. The whole reason I got wore out on it is, like you said, Raw would start with the authority always coming out, and it just wore itself thin for me. But I wouldn't be completely closed off to it. I would just have to see how the execution was done.
So also too, and Colt and I had this conversation, over under, I guess maybe odds, I should say, better suited for that. Tony Khan takes a GTS on Collision one of these weeks. And how does he do?
Oh God, man.
That's a hard one to sell too. I mean, he'd have to really lay it in for him.
Yeah, he would take it about as good as Vince took the stunner the first time,
which was revolutionary. So I guess we're on the same path.
Yeah, it'd be about on par with that, I would say.
All right, so stay tuned for that, guys. But as I was mentioning in the big three, we talked about Masha Slamovich, we talked about Rina Yameshita, about intergender matches, and I go back to a Wrestling Tonight where Chad and I had a very long conversation about the future of wrestling is intergender, and we talked about could it happen on WWE, and I think you guys actually did a topic on the debate about this.
Yep.
Rhea Ripley is reportedly set to wrestle intergender matches very soon. So a recent report from Better Wrestling Experience noted that there is some truth to rumors on Ripley working matches against male WWE superstars, as this always has been part of the plan for her ongoing push. So we know she's had some inklings of a feud with Cody Rhodes. We know Kevin Owens and her had a little bit of strife on Raw. It was also noted that Ripley's Money in the Bank opponent or opponents will be revealed soon, confirming that she will have a match on the card. She right now is the reigning women's champion. But what are your thoughts on them doing the intergender wrestling? Are you getting your hopes up that they're going to present it in the right way, or will this just be a continuation of the way China was presented, where it was more like, yes, they're doing this, but it's because of who she is, not because they're opening that door. If that makes sense. Like, I think she's a one-off.
Bingo. We're not going to see the entire women's roster integrating into the men's roster and all of these matchups open up. We're not going to see Liv Morgan against Brock Lesnar, guys. Chill out. I think it's Ripley, man. I think she has China. They did it well with China. I think Ripley has something where people can buy into it. I think Charlotte has it too. I would buy Charlotte going against someone. But it's not that I don't buy other people. I just don't think WWE is going to lock in and go full tilt into it. I think Rhea is in this sweet spot where her character has kind of transcended what we expect out of someone, like the fans have made this happen. I don't think this was in the cards from WWE. I think when they were building up the Judgment Day version of Rhea Ripley, and it just kind of grew its own legs and the fans got behind it. I think that's what made the front office take notice of, fuck, man, we could put her against some guys. Yeah. Like, she's got that China quality where the masses will buy into it, because even though you and the rest of the hardcore Ace, we're open to that. There's a lot of people out there that would they buy it. And I think that they're entertaining this because I do think the casuals would buy Rhea stepping in the ring with some of these guys, because she's just got that quality, man. She's got that China gene.
I would love to see her a feud with Austin Theory over the U.S. title. Have her take the U.S. title from him. Why not?
It'd be great.
I mean, it'd be again, a tribute thing. And they love things like this where they're doing a love letter to China and maybe they don't want to. And I know they've mended fences since she's passed and all that because she went in the Hall of Fame. But maybe they do that, where obviously China's a former IC champion. Chris Jericho did the job to her. So if Jericho can do it, Austin Theory can. That means anyone really can do it. So we'll see what happens. I mean, she's on a dominant run with the Women's World Championship. We're going to talk about Asuka's new upgraded title we saw on SmackDown. They're making all the titles in unison, but I think we should be kind of ready for Rhea's championship to be rebranded similar to what we saw for the World Heavyweight Championship. So the whole brand is kind of together at this point.
Yeah.
So expect that to happen pretty soon. All right. So moving on from Rhea Ripley, let's go to CM Punk and FTR versus Samoa Joe and Jay White. Also with Juice Robinson, main event of Collision. I heard you guys on the flagship very critical of this, and I don't blame you. The 6-man tag will headline the first ever episode of Collision, setting the tone for a Bull Club Gold versus FTR feud. CM Punk versus Samoa Joe has some legs here with the history, obviously, between Joe and Punk on the ROH days. But this is a big deal. They have a lot for the 17th coming up this weekend. We'll preview it in the week ahead. They're putting a lot of eggs in this basket, hoping a 6-man tag match can get people to tune in. CM Punk's debut will do enough. But do you think like this main event, have you cooled down since as hot as you were on Wednesday when you guys were recording the flagship?
Look, the match is going to be great. Everybody in this match is great. But I just think they've botched this entire Punk thing, man. I'm not saying, even if you can't get the Elite and him to come back, I just feel like this is what he's coming back to, just a 6-man with FTR, who we want in the Elite angle, and then you throw Joe, who he has history with, and then 2 guys he wants to work with. I don't know. It's just kind of like, hey, he's back. Here's a match. Here's a really good match, but there's no like heat on it for me. Like, and that's not to say heat can't come out of this. And that's not to say we're never going to get the Elite and Punk, because even Meltzer was asked a question this week, who has been all over, these 2 guys. This is legit. This isn't a work. They do not want to work together, blah, blah, blah. But then Meltzer was asked, do you think they could ever work together? And he was like, oh yeah. Yeah. He was like, this story could happen. He was like, it's wrestling. So it's like, for Dave to say that, knowing how severe it is between these guys, I think we could get that. But I'm like, dude, like I said on the flagship, you only have so many opportunities where big moments, like the moment you floated, Ace, the fantasy booking you floated on the debate last week with Sting and MJF in a title versus career match. Moments like that are like finding a needle in a haystack. They are so rare. And when one presents it, especially worked shoots, a work that comes out of a shoot, they're rare, man, to work. And you have one on a platter, and the fact that they just couldn't make something happen, and this is how Punk returns after so many months away, it leaves a little, and I'm the most diehard AEW fan, but this just, it's disappointing to me. It really is. It's like, man, you could have brought him back in such a heater role, and this is what we're going to get.
Well, it feels appropriate too that he's working with Jay White, who has been brought in as someone who feels like a non-factor. And Jay White was someone that WWE had their eyes on. And to me, when I looked at Jay White, he would be someone brought in on the same platter and the same landscape as AJ Styles, the pre-packaged main eventer you have, where he's this big, larger than life character. And he feels like just another guy that's on the show. And they do that all the time where these guys debut. And that's my fear with the Punk stuff. And of course, Punk has the show and Collisions based on him, so I know he'll have meaningful stories. But if he comes back feeling like just another guy, that takes away this allure of, as you guys mentioned, him being that guy with instead of Takeshita. That was booked perfectly. Maybe that was what they were trying to do and they couldn't get everyone to agree. Having him there, that would make the appeal for Collision like, I have to tune in Saturday. I have to. What's happening? Yeah. Will the Elite show up? Are they going to show up and attack him? And maybe they do come together down the line a few months from now when everyone's doing their thing and everyone's traveling and everything's going well, knock on wood. Hopefully that's happening. Maybe they do it, but I would hope it takes away some of the luster when it's not the origin of his comeback, where he's not trying to right the wrongs and come in hot on the biggest story that everybody knows about.
Yep.
It's not like we're all sitting here like wonder why he was gone. And everybody that's an AEW fan knows that this story happened, and you're going to sit there and ignore it. And it feels like you created two different shows just to get around the fact that you're not doing this story. You use the word cowardly. I don't think that's strong, but it seems like it's a utopian type of mindset that's just never going to work, because eventually everyone's going to have to get on the same page to make this happen.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to work, because if you can't make this story work, that means people can't work together, and that work environment eventually is going to collapse. You can't keep two different paths open for two different types of people, where there's going to be derision in the locker room, where there's going to be Punk's people and the Elite's people. And that should have been squashed a long time ago before you had them come back and work together. If that's not solved, then this shouldn't happen in the first place. They shouldn't have Punk come back unless everybody's on the same page. And I'm not blaming Punk. I'm not blaming the Elite. It seems like it's everybody's issue now. And if you want to have harmony and the best possible product, you have to be able to do business.
You have to do business. Not everyone's going to get along all the time. People got to suck it up a little bit. Everyone has fault here in some form or fashion until, we don't know, like Sneed said, until we know what happened, you got to blame everybody to some degree. And I just feel, this feels like how I felt in the WCW invasion when WWE bought WCW.
Right.
It was like, yeah, you did it, but it wasn't what we wanted it to be. Where's Sting? Where's Flair?
Who else did you get? Sean Stasiak.
It's like, what the fuck is this? Like, we were wanting something so big, and it's just like, this is what we're getting. Really? Like, you have this moment in your hand, and it's the only time you're going to have this moment. Not to say we can't do the Elite, but Sneed laid his booking out, and it was beautiful. I mean, just put Punk in Takeshita's spot. And I love Takeshita, and I think he's getting a big rub off of Callis, and I love that that's happening. But if that was Punk, you're talking about heat on a level we've never seen, maybe. Like, it could have been masterful. And I just think what's happening right now, it's going to be good, but it feels like how we were talking about Seth's title as being kind of the participation trophy title. This feels like the participation trophy storyline with Punk. And we could all look like fools. Saturday could come. FTR and Punk could do a complete change in that episode, because I did see Dax Harwood post something along the lines of, this Saturday, everything changes. Now, maybe he's talking about a new show starting, or maybe he's talking about there's a huge heel turn coming. We don't know. That's why we watch pro wrestling.
Agreed. And you know what? I was saying everyone's at fault, and I think everyone's at fault for not working together. I will still remain critical of how Punk handled the scrum and
100%
stuff on social media. I've been nothing but critical of that, and he lost the fan in me, 100%. I will never root for the dude as far as professional wrestling, but I'm happy to boo him if he's on my screen. I think at this point, he's good for AEW as long as everyone's willing to do business. And you know what? There's a large sect of the fan base that do like him. He has the largest star power. He's still one of the number one merch sellers in the company. Personally, I just alienated me as a fan. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have him on the company. I will never say that. I think he should be a part of AEW as long as everybody's willing to meet in the middle and let bygones be bygones, because Matt Hardy and Edge were able to do it. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were able to do it.
Yeah.
Come on. Let's get it going.
Dude, you're preaching to the choir, man. Like, he didn't lose me as a fan, but I've never had a wrestler just like take me on. I like Punk, and there's elements of I like his kind of asshole quality to him where he just says what he feels, and I like that. But the scrum shit, when that happens, those are the moments where it's like, I'm like, God damn it, dude. You're justifying everything your haters say about you. That's when me as a Punk fan, I'm like, I can't support you in this, man. Like, you're making it hard for me to be a fan. So it's like, I just have a love-hate with Punk. But I do think AEW, as long as he doesn't blow the place up, I do think it helps them. They're in a low point, and he could really help this company if he doesn't let his ego get involved.
Point is, there's larger conflict that's been navigated through by other leadership and other
100%.
companies for promotions and made money. And go to WCW, and I know they're in their very formidable years before they were even thinking about potentially going under. There were a lot of personalities there that did not get along. I mean, you hear stories now from, you even read Brian Alvarez's book, Death of WCW, or even read or listen to anyone's podcast about their time there. And even with WWF,
HBK and Bret Hart,
just the amount of chaos in the WWF locker room that was just sorted out. And like, I can't imagine back in the day that they would have said they didn't want to work together, but legal issues be damned. It's like, how could you have him come back and not address this storyline in some capacity? And we could be sitting here this time next week where they did it, and all of a sudden the Elite attack them on Collision, and we go off to the races, Young Bucks and FTR and Omega and Punk, and you get this big match at All In. Maybe they do it, but it seems crazy that you wouldn't, especially as a fan pleasing company. You have to address the elephant in the room. Like, you make us feel so smart for everything else, but then you don't address this and pretend it doesn't exist, where Punk's issues are with the Bullet Club after everything that went down.
It's insulting. It's insulting, man. Like, it's the same way and I get there's legalities involved, but I'm a fan. I don't care about that. I don't care. When I watch AEW All Access and the Bucks are talking about, that was the hardest time I've ever been to, but you never tell us what the hardest time is. You just have them talk around everything. Like, we all know what they're talking about. Address it. It's like everyone's pussyfooting around the big issue. And in the beginning, I get it. There's like lawsuits and all this potential shit, but at a certain point, man, you got to open the gates and let the wrestling fans in, because when you start treating wrestling fans like they're dumb and that we're just going to look the other way, that's when it gets bad for you. We stop trusting you because you won't treat us. And that's why I'm so frustrated, because Tony has always treated fans smart. He's always acknowledged the outside world of wrestling beyond the borders of AEW, which treats fans like, we're smart fans. We know what's going on. He's always done that. This is the first time, and I don't fully blame him. I get legalities probably have a lot of hands tied here, but again, I'm a fan. I don't care about that. You have to find ways to make this work and make me understand and make me care about this decision you're making, because right now it just feels like the wrong decision. And
Yeah, I agree with you. And hopefully we get some resolution to this, and maybe the storyline with the Bullet Club and Samoa Joe will be that amazing that we are forgetting about the Elite, but that's a high bar to set. So
I'm pumped for Collision. I'm pumped for Saturday wrestling, dude. Even if it's my Sunday morning coffee, if I can't watch it Saturday night, I will be watching it within that 24 hours of airing. So I'm pumped for it. So
they got to make it worth it. I'm not saying it has to be the Elite Punk stuff, but
it can't be Rampage.
It cannot be Rampage. Very well said. So let's get into the All Together Again show that took place at the Sumo Hall on 6/9/23, the promotional show with New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, and Pro Wrestling Noah. Great show by all conversation. I did not get to watch this, but Meltzer was very complimentary of the match that they had in the main event. As we mentioned before, it's Okada from New Japan Pro Wrestling, Keno from Noah, and Ayagi from All Japan Pro Wrestling. They defeated Hiroshi Tanahashi of New Japan Pro Wrestling, Kato Kiyomiya from Noah, and Kento Miyahara from All Japan Pro Wrestling. So a 6-man tag match. I'm going to go back and watch this because I heard it was great. From commentary that people were saying about this, the entrances alone made this match feel huge. Was said to be a match of the year contender and that's high praise for a 6-man tag match. After the final bell, all three rosters walked to the ring. Okada cut the show ending promo where he thanked the fans for sticking with them through the pandemic. Okada then welcomed Inoki's family to the ring. So a very well organized end to this. And of course, Tanahashi took the pin from the Rainmaker. Okada getting ready to take on Bryan Danielson, has to look strong. Man, for a 6-man tag match, and we'll get into this with Dave's raves, he gave this 5 stars.
Damn.
Yeah, absolutely insane. And we were talking about this event. It's been building up for a bit. We've been giving you guys all the inklings about what the card will look like and not a lot of stakes, a very safe booking with all three promotions, and you didn't want certain guys to look a certain way. Having the New Japan guy pin the other New Japan guy was a safe way of booking. But there's a lot of cool stories in between here. We talked about Okada and Kiyomiya earlier in the year, but with his work shoot stuff, and Kiyomiya was taking kicks to the head from Okada, where people didn't know if it was an actual fight or not, which was awesome. They really made Kiyomiya and Pro Wrestling Noah feel on the same level as New Japan Pro Wrestling, and that's the beauty of these interpromotional shows where everybody benefits from things like this. When you have three promotions working together, they all feel like they're equal, and the guys that benefit are the fans of pro wrestling. Kiyomiya feels like a really big deal now, and on the same level as Okada, and that's a beautiful thing because this time last year, Kiyomiya was a relative unknown.
Yeah, just the fact that you're getting three of the three biggest Japanese promotions working together, it's very cool. There was a lot of tag matches on this card, but maybe the card as a whole, it's not pushing storyline as much as like an event, but the selling point isn't the storylines. It's the fact that these three companies are getting their biggest stars to be in the ring together. It reminds me of, for all the movie fans out there, when especially the horror movie fans, I remember when Freddy versus Jason came out.
Right.
And the movie wasn't the greatest movie. I mean, it wasn't that great. But the fact that you're seeing Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees on the screen together, it was this like, holy shit, I've watched all these movies and now we're seeing them together. To see Okada and all of those dudes, Miyahara, come on, man. That's fun. It's fun to see. Could you imagine another situation where you'd have Impact, WWE, and AEW, and you're getting, Alex Shelley, Seth Rollins, and Kenny Omega? It would be a blast.
It would be awesome to see, especially and that's the creative way of booking this as well, because I didn't even think about Okada pinning Tanahashi, because that's just in-house business here, where you could just do that, where you're not worried about Okada making Kiyomiya look weak by pinning him, and what happens if Okada pins Miyahara. It's smart booking. So that's really the out you have here, where you have a built-in guy that you have no problem pinning. And if you put a match, we're building it together, Roman Reigns, as you mentioned, MJF and whoever, versus a group of faces, Seth Rollins and whoever, you could find a way to creatively book it. And just mentioned here, the entrances alone. Can you imagine the entrance? Roman with that long entrance, and then MJF's, and it feels special. It feels like an event. And that's what this felt like all together again from Sumo Hall and 6ix9ine. I'm going to be checking this match out, especially since Dave gave it 5 stars. I thought it was unassuming. I just thought we'll read the results. We'll talk about it. But now I have to check it out. They said the other matches were great too. We had other familiar faces there. So go and check this card out. If anything, if this does well, maybe other promotions will be like, okay, cool. Now we have to 100% think about working together.
Yeah. The match events like this are all about the novelty, the specialness of the event, the spectacle of the event. It's not so much, the storylines, which they did a great job booking it, where, like you said, Okada isn't hurt going into Forbidden Door. They did a great job. So you got to support events like that, so we get more of them.
Continuing with New Japan Pro Wrestling, the strong openweight champion Kenta has responded to a report of a potential match against CM Punk at Forbidden Door. So this has been going back and forth for quite some time. Kenta's been overly critical of CM Punk even before everything went down with AEW. He was quoted a tweet from Wrestling Cover's Twitter account referencing a Fightful report that Kenta versus CM Punk has been discussed for the event on June 25th. The company tweet included a fake graphic made by its Tom's Custom account. Kenta acknowledged that the report continues, obviously, as I talked about, a long run and typically one-sided social media feud between Kenta and Punk, based largely around the fact that they use the same finisher. Like that Kenta invented the go to sleep, Punk made it famous or whatever. And that's usually the back and forth that both Kenta fans and Punk fans have. But on June 6th, Kenta tweeted in a response to a video of Punk acknowledging that he stole his GTS finisher from Kenta in an interview from more than a decade ago. Kenta said he was willing to wrestle Punk if the money was right. And he said, I don't care who's the original go to sleep. There's only one truth. If you want me to have a match against Punk, give me the correct amount of money. Other than that, I don't need to have this match. Seriously. There hasn't been a lot of buzz on Kenta. He feels forgotten a bit, and I hate to say that, but do you think there's enough buzz on this to use the bullet of Punk, to shoot that bullet and have Kenta versus Punk? Do you think that sells on the same level that maybe it would have had few years ago? Because it doesn't feel like Kenta has the same momentum he had.
He doesn't, but if Punk's flirting with the whole Bullet Club thing, Kenta's Bullet Club, right?
Cool. I like that idea. Nice
You
tie-in.
know, like there's some sort of tie-in there. It's a built-in story. I know it's all based around the finisher. Maybe it's not this in-depth story, but I would Punk Kenta, good size matchup. They match up equally. I think when I hear Kenta say, give me the correct amount of money, that what I'm reading between the lines there is give me the right amount of money to lose, because I would bet he goes into a match against Punk, it's finisher against finisher. They're going to try and book Punk over, and he's not going to want to put him over since he created the finisher unless he's paid right. And I don't blame the guy. Like, get your money, dude. Get your money. But I don't have a problem with this. Okada's tied up. Ospreay's tied up. Do we want to see Tanahashi and Punk? I don't really. I'd rather see Tanahashi and someone else.
It was supposed to happen last year, but it was for the tie. It was, the fact that the AEW
I feel
title
like
was on
Mox
the line.
filled that in, and
Yeah.
Kenta and I'm okay with Kenta and Punk. I think the Bullet Club tie-in makes it okay for me.
We'll see if Tony opens up the wallet and pays him, and he has to consider if it's worth for the casual fan to tune in for Kenta. Does it have the dream match appeal? I think it does, but we're very close to it though. So
but the beauty of it, you don't have to. The fans won't tune in for that. That's just another. The two matches we're tuning in for has been made.
It sprinkles on top of the ice cream sundae. I get it.
Yeah, this is just extra shit, man. We're getting Ospreay Omega 2. We're getting Okada Danielson. Anything else is like a cherry on top, man.
So WWE TV rights negotiating window is closing with NBC Universal and Fox. So similar to a lot of how contracts they have a certain window of time where they can only exclusively navigate and come to an agreement together before they can start reaching out to other streaming platforms. So the exclusive WWE TV rights negotiating window for both Fox and NBC Universal have closed, and now the company can officially solicit interest from the rest of the broadcast and streaming world. You could be naive and believe that they already aren't doing that. That's, tampering clauses be damned. I'm sure they have interest and know who's out there who has some interest in, over drinks at a hotel bar. I'm sure people are talking about it.
Right.
But the news was the first reported by New York Post Andrew Martian, who was included. An interesting note about AEW and Warner Brothers Discovery. The exclusive period began during WrestleMania weekend in April. In late May, Nick Khan said the window had already closed with Fox, while NBC Universal still had some time. While he noted some incumbents traditionally remain the favorites, obviously the familiar faces, sources have indicated that Disney has shown interest, but for FX as opposed to ESPN, as the latter can't guarantee a specific night of the week. He also stated Amazon Prime Video will be in talks with WWE. That fits with their narrative of trying to, do the NFL. They have their deal for Thursday night games, and they're bidding for college football's Big Ten. So it fits live programming. Amazon wants to get their Prime Video off the ground more so than it's already there. And Martian also notes that he considers both Apple and Warner Brothers Discovery as dark horses candidates due to their NBA pursuits. But one nugget I was told that may interest wrestling fans is that Warner Brothers Discovery does not have to stay exclusive to AEW. It would be something if it got in on WWE, but I haven't seen it yet. So that was like a one-off thing there. I can't imagine Warner Brothers Discovery would get in bed with both companies. It seems ridiculous that they would be strange bedfellows. I was more interested in the Amazon Prime thing because because I know that there was conversation about, I think, the original Fox deal. There was a talk about bringing Netflix into the fold, and that seemed ridiculous at the time when they signed the Fox deal because TV wasn't as fully cord cut as it is now.
Right.
I think now Raw could live on Amazon Prime Video and people would flock to it because that's just where it lives.
Yeah, I think going the route of a streaming service is not out of the question, man. Like it's truly not. Like, and though if you look at the type of money they are spending on things, especially Amazon, I mean, Jesus, they bought the Lord of the Rings I forget how many billions they're putting into that show. Like I think each episode was like $100 million episode for the Lord of the Rings series on Amazon. So the one I was more intrigued by, and the one that seems like the reports that I was reading and is the Disney one.
Yeah.
I was not expecting the FX element. I was thinking Disney does the whole Disney Plus brings over the network onto Disney Plus, and then maybe an ESPN for the weekly TV and things of that nature. But the FX deal, that's intriguing, but gut feeling, Ace, do you think they go with someone completely new, or do you think they stay where they're at? I think they're going to stay where they're at.
They are, and it seems like right now they're trying to get leverage as far as what the worth is. I think Nick Khan had projected that the rights fee could increase by 1.5 times what the current deals are. So just to be clear, the 5-year deals right now, NBC Universal is paying $265 million, of course, a year for Raw. Fox pays $205 million a year for SmackDown. Do the math on that. They're looking for somewhere north of $300 million for each of them. I would say that the incumbents have the edge. NBC Universal, there's something to be said about living on USA. They haven't been there for their full run, but majority of Raw has lived there. And I think being on Fox has really helped them. You know, Fox is available in a lot of different homes. So Fox has some, whether Nick Khan wants to admit it or not, Fox has some leverage that other places don't, because there's a difference in being on Fox, which is on a lot of basic cable plans, than being on Amazon Prime, which, you know, speaking of Amazon Prime, they have the Yankee games sometimes on for Amazon Prime. And my grandma calls me every time. She's like, I can't find the Yankee game. They're not on the Yes Network. So I'm trying to walk her through how to get on the streaming service. I walked her how to do that. There'll be a lot of wrestling fans, and a lot of the WWE fans lean to be older for the demographics. So you're alienating a lot of those fans where maybe they don't have grandchildren or younger people in their life to show them how to find it. And maybe they just give up and they don't find it. So you're taking a risk by completely going the cord cutting.
100%. If they would leave USA, let's just talk about, I mean, Fox is a big deal. It's, you know, the big four, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. But just because USA's been their home for so long, if they leave there, does it hurt them in any way?
I think it does. I mean, not if they go to something equal. FX doesn't feel equal to me. I mean, maybe they want to present it. I know FX is spending a lot of money on different things that they've been doing, and they have a lot of good TV shows and good content.
They wouldn't have sports. The big thing with FX, they wouldn't be preempted by anything.
True.
At all. But
that's also the lead in as well. That helps. USA does help with, you know, some people may be tuning into hockey on USA, which wasn't always the case, of course, but there's also a big piece of that, where even with the AEW piece as well, like you can have, and I know they get preempted for it as well, but man, you're taking a risk. And I think obviously Nick Khan will be like, well, you know what, we'll go anywhere. But I think their knee-jerk reaction, they've been pretty comfortable with Fox. I think the 5-year deal has been pretty rewarding for both sides. I would say Fox probably would re-up if they could get the same exact deal, but we know inflation and money does go up, and the worth of WWE has gone astronomically through the roof.
Right.
So I can imagine that they're going to go back and forth. They're going to negotiate with different places, but there's a very comfortable spot with NBC Universal and Fox. And I think they both continue to live there.
Yeah, I think they're staying. I think this is all just kind of posturing to get a bigger deal.
Down the line, though, I can see maybe not this deal, but the next deal, a player like Netflix pops in, and you're going to have live programming that lives exclusively on streaming. And that would be a huge jump for just the trend of how things go, because WWE, whether they like it or not, and I think they do like it a lot, they're setting the trend for what happens in the future of how cable companies. So there's a lot of pressure here in precedent setting, where Fox is fighting people to stay. WWE and live programming, the NFL, the NBA, all these things are keeping people tuned in to the cable cutting. And if one of these guys leave, say the NFL eventually leaves altogether, and NBA, and there wouldn't be a reason to keep locked up in these cable companies, and all of a sudden the landscape completely changes. So this is a pivotal deal, not only for WWE, but for how we perceive and get our entertainment at large, because this could be man, everything is just streaming based, and WWE could be the first domino to fall, which they usually are. They usually are a trendsetter.
Yeah, 100%. Cable is on the way out. I mean, this live sports is the only thing that's kind of keeping them afloat.
Yeah.
And we saw Netflix. Netflix is flirting with live TV. They did the Chris Rock stand-up special live.
Yeah.
They're wanting to dip their toe into that water. So I think Netflix, Amazon, and those type of places, they know that once they open up live programming, once they become a player in live sports and bidding for the rights of those companies and those leagues, man, they could really put the final coffin in cable TV. If live sports leaves cable, it's going to change everything that we know, that we've grown up with. It's going to change everything.
Yeah, well, the larger conversation too, and I don't want to get too far into it, but a lot of these negotiated deals, I think about like the Dodgers deal with Fox Sports Los Angeles, and I think they're Bally Sports now, but at the original when they negotiated with Fox Sports, all of their revenue is based up front on this agreement on TV rights. So it really alienates the fans that don't have cable, or if you live in the market and you want to stream it, you can't. So you could buy the MLB package. And I always look at this as you want people to consume your product because that gets people to watch things going forward. And this goes back to, and if you don't want your main programming to live on the free TVs where, AEW was flirting with the idea of Tubi or whatever the free TV is.
Right.
But there's a level of exposure that is beneficial where the more accessible it is, the more beneficial it is for the product, where WWE is having their cake and eating it too, because with Fox, they're uber accessible with everybody, more so than a lot of channels, and they're getting paid double for it. So the Fox deal is a sweetheart deal for them, and I can't see them walking away unless, Fox really lowballs them and doesn't have an interest in keeping wrestling. But I would say the ratings are good, and live programming is something you really can't get that does well. They do 2 million people, over 2 million
on a
every
Friday.
Yeah.
Like, dude, the ratings have been, and just talking about, not losing live sporting to streaming, Fox has got to have that in the back of their head too. Like, man, this is something that brings people to pay for cable to keep us in, because I know like a lot of streaming services don't offer Fox, CBS, NBC. Those network channels are kind of really, really banking on cable sticking around. Because I know like Sling doesn't offer the major 4. I have it. I can't watch that. I can't watch SmackDown on my Sling. I can watch Raw because they have all the cable channels, but they don't offer those. I'm sure like YouTube TV and things like that, they probably offer the big 4, but some don't. So Fox is probably in the back of their head like, didn't NFL, the NFL Sunday Ticket that went away. I think YouTube has exclusive rights for the upcoming season. So now people don't feel like I have to get DirecTV. I had DirecTV for a long time because of the Sunday Ticket. And now
it would shock me if DirecTV got liquidated into another company. Like that was the only thing keeping them, man. Like it really.
Oh yeah. When they went into AT&T and all that happened, like they merged with AT&T, I think that was like the beginning of the end for them. It's a cost thing too. They're charging too much. Like I only had cable for as long as I did because of live sports, watching UFC fights, football games, and wrestling. That's all I had it for. And it got to a point where I could watch my wrestling on other means. I could watch UFC fights on other means. And it was like, I'm essentially paying $150 a month to watch one football game a week. And I got rid of it. And I think a lot of people are like me, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, I think the future is not in this deal. It's the next deal for WWE. And I think this deal is probably going to be about 4 to 5 years. But I think where the future is, if you follow the trends, I think it's a menu of types of services similar to the NFL package that you mentioned for YouTube, where you can specifically buy the games for your team. And I think you get more of a bundled, cost-efficient package if you buy the full package. But bang for your buck. If you just want to watch, if you live in Los Angeles, you want to watch the Buffalo Bills, that package exists out there for you. Instead, back in the day, you used to buy the full DirecTV package, and that was what you were, it was monopolized. And, you can give credit to DirecTV. They locked up that deal, understanding where NFL was going way back in the day, being like, we'll lock you guys up to 2022 or 2023, whenever it ended, well long ago, early 90s, something like that. They signed it.
I think that kept them.
Crazy. I think we lost Chad for a second. I wasn't sure if it was me or him, but I'm going to pull this back over here. So I'm going to continue here over on, I think I have a plain backdrop over here. Let me just pull this up quick. Get rid of the overlay. But we'll continue here with Stardom talent not expected at AW Forbidden Door. So wrestlers from Stardom are not expected to appear at the pay-per-view. There's been some conversation by Dave Meltzer if, in fact, we'd have Stardom talent, an all-female promotion. So Stardom Sunshine 2023 pay-per-view takes place on the same exact day. So that ended any debate we had potentially about them being involved. The promotion's top stars are all booked for matches. And additionally, Stardom did call Dave Meltzer and say specifically that there would not be anything involved with Forbidden Door. So maybe next year. And I think it's important to think about because their women's division stacked. They are the staple and the precedent setting for the women's division as it goes. So Meltzer said, this is from Stardom. First of all, none of the Stardom women have Canadian visas. So even if they wanted to do something, it would have to be rushed. Stardom has a pay-per-view on the same day. Continue to talk about it was going to be Kyrie and Tom Nakano at the show, but they did make an inquiry at the time. So the only contact that has been was Kyrie, who could get a visa from her time working with WWE. There's already been like a pipeline set up, but not happening. And, I think down the line, it could be something that they look forward to. The other thing in here, we have the blocks for the New Japan Pro Wrestling G1 Climax 33. So the 2023 G1 Climax will see the tournament debut of Shota Umino, Hikuleo, Eddie Kingston, Ren Narita, Gabriel Kidd, Alex Coughlin, Shane Hayes, Mikey Nichols. There's 32 guys in this. And I see we're back joined by Chad. So thanks.
I'm back. The internet just went out for whatever reason, man.
I thought it was me because I thought I was spinning. So I'm sitting here in silence. I'm like thinking it was me while you're still talking, but all good, guys. Thanks for hanging with us. We're just talking about the G1 Climax here. I just mentioned that Stardom's not participating because they have.
Are you talking about how Eddie Kingston's going to run the fucking tables, dude?
100%. So we're going to get this kicking off on Saturday, July 15th. When the block action's over, the top two wrestlers from each block will advance to elimination phase, quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. I mean, they go at it from July 15th until August 13th. It's a month of just absolute chaos of just your body taking a beating. Right now, Sonata, interestingly enough, is involved in the G1. He's currently the IWGP champion. So historically, similar to those that just watched WWE, if he wins, well, whoever wins would get a title shot, but if he wins, he won't have to defend it. I guess like if you enter the Royal Rumble and you win yourself as the champion, you don't have to defend the title. But some of the names in here are awesome to look at. We got the A block, which is Sonata, Chase Owens, Hikuleo, Ren Narita, Shota Umino. We got Sushi, he was a guy we thought was going to win the title off of Sonata at Dominion. Gabe Kidd, Kaito Kiyomiya, who we were just singing praises from Noah. On the B block, we have Okada. He won 2 straight tournaments already, looking for his 3rd straight. Yoshihashi, Taichi, Kenta, Great Okan, Will Ospreay, Tongaloa, El Phantasmo. And the C block, we have David Finlay. We got Ishii, Evil, Tamatanga, Takagi, Aaron Hanare, Eddie Kingston, Mikey Nichols. And the D block, this is surprising to me. 46-year-old Hiroshi Tanahashi is taking place in a month-long tournament of just back-to-back-to-back matches. He's in a block with Naito, Hiroki Goto, Zack Sabre Jr., Toru Yano, Jeff Cobb, Shane Hayes, and Alex Coughlin. A stark, missing piece of this tournament is Bryan Danielson. And I know that he said he wanted to do it. I just can't see how they would allow him to be off of AEW television for a month. You think next year?
He's going to get, Tony's going to give this to him. He wants to do it. I feel like this year he's kind of appeasing Danielson with that Okada match.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get him in a G1. It just has to happen. I feel like he has to do that before he hangs it up. If you're looking at these blocks, Ace, who's your three? If you had three people to pick as favorites, who are you going with? Because I got to be honest, man, that Kiyomiya, it's a possibility. Like, I've heard Dave talk like he is being bred for the next. He could be one of the next guys, like the guy.
I'll be interested to see how they present him here because he's a Noah guy, and I know the relationship's good. I'd be interested to see how Sonato loses, and they've done it before where the champion loses. Like Okada was in last year's champion, he lost a couple times. I mean, he got pinned, so he was able to win the whole thing altogether. But Sonata in here will have to figure out a way. Maybe they start the next program by having him lose. I would say A block. I'm probably going to pick Sushi's probably. I would pick for the A block the favorite. Going through the B block, I think Okada gets through. C block, if I'm looking at that, David Finlay. I really think his time to shine is pretty soon. If not, maybe Shingo Takagi. And the D block, man, that's the toughest one to pick because you got a couple names in here that could go all the way. I would like to see Naito, man. I think Naito going through would be awesome to see. Or even like a Zack Sabre Jr. But
yeah, you can never count out Naito.
There's a good mix of people here. You mentioned Eddie Kingston running the gamut. I would love that, dude. If Eddie Kingston got to the finals, I think it would be an awesome place for him to shine. This style of wrestling he loves, does it so well.
Even if it came down to him and one guy in C block, if it came down where it was him or another guy coming out of C block, I would be happy. I just don't want him to get steamrolled. Like if it's him and Finlay or him and Takagi, that would be a win for Kingston, I feel like.
Yeah, I think so. And I can't imagine that he'd be, unless he has other obligations, has to get back to build for Death Before Dishonor on the ROH side, that he's going to be in there for a cup of coffee that the July 15th. And I forget exactly what day the Death Before Dishonor show is, but being in Japan for a full month, that's a full commitment. Like if you're going to be there for the full, from 15th till August 13th, that's a long time to be there. And I know the couple of years that this will be the first year without the same restrictions that were in place for the many years where you weren't able to leave and you had to be stuck in a hotel room. Like this will be the first year they're not stuck to that, but it's still grind. We're wrestling multiple times a week, really hard hitting matches. I knew that they have 20-minute time limits. Some of them will go 20 minutes. But this style of wrestling, it's tough on your body. That's why I was saying before, with Tanahashi being there as a 46-year-old guy with a bad back, I don't know how that's wise. Talk about bump cards being utilized. Having him utilize what can't be, it's a limited amount of bumps on that bump card. For him to be like, let me just go all out in the G1 Climax, he would have to say, hey, listen, man, this is something I really want to do because I can't imagine that's responsible on anyone's part.
Right.
Like, is that the best use of Tanahashi in this tournament?
No, I mean, I hate to say it, but you can kind of say that with Danielson, man. Like,
true, you're right.
Like, that's probably why Tony's a little hesitant because we know how hard Danielson goes. And it's like, are you willing to let this guy go into this tournament that it's a brutal grind?
Yeah.
Not only are you giving him away for the time, that's fine. You can book around it. You can give him time off, but you don't know how much that's going to take off his bump card. So it's like Tanahashi, Danielson, those type of guys, when you get up in there, that's what makes it impressive when they enter into the G1, because we all know how brutal the G1 is. It's a grind.
I'd imagine, though, in the negotiations with Tony Khan, this had to be there. Like, you have to allow me to do similar to John Moxley's allowed to do blood sport. He's allowed to go out and do whatever, Scrapper Mania, and he's allowed to go out to do GCW events and death matches and do the glass. This is the equivalent for Bryan Danielson. And maybe Tony Khan's like, just not right now. Please let me just have this time with you. I can't lose you on our television for a month. You weren't able to be a part of Forbidden Door last year. You need to be here. Please don't be there. Because as you mentioned, if we lose Bryan Danielson to an injury at the G1 Climax, I mean, the fans that are enjoying this product, it'll feel worth it because he's going out there and giving his body to something that he loves. But I think everyone looks at him at a limited capacity of being on AEW television for, he even said it, he's not going to do it forever. You know, I mean, there's only a certain amount of times, and we're going to utilize how many matches here? You know, how many matches are going to be in this tournament if he goes all the way through?
If you're booking G1 2024 and Danielson's in it, do you have him win it?
I don't think he has to, especially with, and he probably wouldn't want to. Like, that's the other thing.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
The beautiful part about the G1 is there's stars being made in here. We've had times where even when Okada won over the last 2 years, he took L's in the middle of this, building new stars and finding a way to, I mean, he lost to Great O'Khan. I think he got pinned by Great O'Khan, and it was a fluke finish and stuff. But that's the creative thing in this tournament, where obviously in the block phase where there's points and everything assigned to time limits and pins and submissions and all that, there's a way to be creative about just being exposed, and like the camaraderie that gets bonded with you were involved in G1. There's something honorable about, for a guy like Mikey Nichols to be a part of this, like he'll have that forever. Alex Coughlin will now have this forever. And just being involved in this lore, because it's really what it is. It's one of the best tournaments. It's what King of the Ring probably could be if they continued it down the line and kept it.
King of the Ring is a joke. Let's be honest.
They could have kept it going. I'm saying, like, G1's been going, and there's been different iterations of it, but many, many years of just absolute banger matches. And the G1, I mean, I know it's all sort of taste and everything, but if you watch matches, there's a lot of the best matches of the year happen just in this tournament on one-off nights where it's just like it's a B block match. And they went out there and crushed Eddie Kingston and Ishii, just absolutely tore it up. And it's a 5-star match on a random Wednesday night.
It's a star making thing. You're right. Like, Danielson doesn't have to win it, but it would be cool. A lot of people has made their names. It would just solidify him. Like it not that he needs solidifying. I mean, the dude is one of the greatest of all time, but man, what a way to go out. That would be I just won the G1, I'm retiring type of thing.
Well, that means he would be facing whoever is the IWGP champion at Wrestle Kingdom too. So that's, you know, that's also kind of bucket list thing for him as well. Like, it's got to be, right? Like, that has to be.
Yeah.
And to think about, you know, less than 10 years ago, would that even be in the scope of possibility that any of that could happen? So, you know, we're living in this alternate utopian universe where Bryan Danielson could participate in this, and maybe it's next year, but we get to see Eddie Kingston. I really hope that he's good to go after the hernia surgery, that he's able to give it his best. And I know this is a dream come true for him too. So I hope you're right. I hope he gets through the block phase and we get to see some really memorable moments, but he's got some
pumped for Eddie. Cause I just know he loves this shit. He eats, sleeps. This is the stuff he was that got him through his fandom was the strong style. So I'm pumped to see him in this.
I mean, lost in this too is Will Ospreay's in there too, and he's banged up as well. Like, you got to save bullets for that guy. His shoulder's hanging on by a thread, and we're having him go for a month here. So
I'm worried about him for All In, man. If he's in G1, they better be careful. He might not make All In because he's already kind of laboring that shoulder.
Yeah, for the love of the game, man. This is you gotta want it if you want to be involved in G1. But we also have a new women's championship, as we talked about before. It was unveiled. We also got the return of Charlotte Flair, which, you know, Charlotte's new gimmick is she comes back, wins a title, then disappears for a while, then comes back again. That's her new gimmick. I think, what was that, Brock Lesnar shirt? Or no, it was an Austin shirt. Arrive, raise hell, and leave.
It's her.
Yeah.
Arrive, win a title, leave.
Pretty much. So a new report from Fightful Select says how WWE source confirmed that Asuka's presentation ceremony was done to clean up the Raw and SmackDown title situation that was muddied up by the draft. So an exchange had been rumored, like WWE did with Becky Lynch and Charlotte back in 2021. But they went with a much different direction. About the aesthetics of the belt, they wanted Asuka's belt to look like Roman's belt to help portray everything on an even plane, which has helped the cause for the past several years. And we also talked about the change in Rhea's championship. They want those two titles to be distinctly different. So we're expecting maybe at some point on Raw, maybe it's happening right now. So if you guys are in the comments and Raw's happening, they present Rhea with a new championship that looks more like the World Heavyweight Championship. Speaking of Charlotte's return as well, I mean, I know I mentioned it should be a bigger story. It might have been a bigger story a couple months ago, but it feels like, again, this seems old hat on her end. She has not been on television since WrestleMania 39, losing to Rhea in that awesome match. She wanted a match against Asuka. Adam Pearce said, I promised Bianca. Flair dismissed the idea as Asuka accepted. We're building towards Flair versus Asuka. I really hope they're not going to end Asuka's run. I hope Asuka can have a lengthy run with the title, that they're not just going to give the title back to Charlotte. Like, if Charlotte's going to be here, like, let's just have some programming before she's champion. Like, they have to have more layers to the story than just making her champion.
Yeah, Asuka getting a win over Flair would be good too. You know, that'd be a big feather in her cap. And talking about the titles, man, I'm all for equality, but good God, why does everything have to look the same? Make the women's title special. Make it look special to them. I'm all for getting rid of this Raw Women's Champion, SmackDown Women's Champion shit. I would be down for the Universal Women's Champion and the World, whatever, you know, like the men aren't branded by their shows. I don't think the women should be either, as far as their world champions, but I don't know. I'm not into the, I like the belts looking unique to themselves, you know?
I agree. But speaking of women's championships, the WWE NXT women's tag team titles will be unified with the WWE women's tag team titles later this month. So Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler versus Fire and Dawn in the title unification bout will take place on June 23rd, which is a SmackDown from Lafayette, Louisiana at the Cajun Dome. The winners will be crowned the inaugural undisputed WWE women's tag team champions, and it looks like they will defend the straps on all three brands. So it's believed the newly designed title belts will be introduced, similar to the WWE women's title that Asuka received this week. We obviously, Shayna Baszler and Rousey have not been champions for a long time. The way I looked at this, and I know they have the name WWE on it, it felt like this was a way to get rid of them off the main roster and put them back on NXT, which is where they probably should live. But it looks like, and there's been conversations too about making the NXT brand an equal third brand, and that's laughable, but that's what they're trying to do.
The wrestling on there is atrocious, man. I'm sorry. Like there's so many people, and there's people in there that are really good, but there's so much wrestling on NXT that is like, it's laughable that these people were on national television.
Agreed. And the other thing is too, if you start doing that, that opens up a little bit of Pandora's box where you don't have one world title, you have two world titles, you don't have three world titles. Then you have four world titles on three different brands where they're floating around. It's just like, if you're making the NXT title with Carmelo Hayes holding it, that's supposed to be equal to Seth Rollins' title and also equal to Roman Reigns' championship. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of titles floating around there, but I do like that the tag titles are being liquidated, but not for the intention of making them defended there.
Right.
Just put them on NXT and let that be kind of exclusive. We have a women's tag division there.
I was hoping that's what it was. I'm for this though. I think it's cool to eliminate one of these because, dude, I'm not hating. Like I just don't think they have the depth to justify a women's tag roster. And they don't, man. Like they barely can put together a men's tag division. Let's be honest. Like I'm talking about a legit tag division. I'm talking about tag teams that are well honed and not just two singles guys put together. And the women's tag division, that's all it really is let's stick to singles. They don't have tried and true tag teams. And if you don't have tried and true tag teams, matching gear, names, been together a while, work together, if it's just singles people put together, you don't need tag titles, in my opinion.
We don't need tag titles, but we do need Dave's Raves. Let's get into Dave's Raves and talk about what his favorite part of the week was.
Let's do it.
Dave Raves.
So there's some weeks where Dave doesn't actually put a match of the week or performer of the week, and sometimes you have to look at the match ratings and try to figure out yourself. So I went through the matches from the whole week. He did rate some Dynamite matches and rated some Raw matches and stuff over the course of all the nights of wrestling. But what he did make clear that his match of the week was Okada, Tanahashi, and Ishii beating Jon Moxley, Claudio, and Shota Umino to retain the Never Trios titles. We talked about this match last week. He had said this was probably the best Never Trios title match in history. He said Moxley and Ishii were great. Okada and Umino have a great veteran / upcoming star chemistry, and Castagnoli was just awesome as well. Obviously, Claudio making his debut in New Japan Pro Wrestling, which seems hard to believe because he fits so well there. The ending saw Umino going for the Death Rider on Okada, but he escaped, hit the landslide and the Rainmaker for the pin. After losing, Moxley pointed to the screen, and Bryan Danielson challenged Okada, which we showed last week, and we got flagged by YouTube, but challenge was made. Speaking of Bryan Danielson as well, he mentioned there was a whole long thing about different things he was talking about, and the newsletter is always so good to read. He said Bryan Danielson has become more important as of late in creative. Danielson last week noted how he and Tony Khan think so much alike as per their views on pro wrestling. Danielson was described as someone who adds good input into any booking conversation. It was said when Khan is booking ideas and he's in the room with him, he pushes Khan to think harder and improves his thinking, like he adds more enthusiasm to Khan. The June 2nd Rampage show, which from an in-ring pro wrestling perspective was one of the best 1 hour shows.
Champions Friday. Great.
That was all Bryan Danielson. And it was Tony Khan's outline, but if you want to look at it as a coloring page, Bryan Danielson filled in all the colors while Tony Khan gave the outline of the drawing. So another piece of how Bryan Danielson is becoming an integral part of creative, and this is what his role will be long after, as we mentioned, the bump card is no longer being tapped into. He could hang it on the shelf and he can still get back to the business.
I think we're seeing the beginning of a beautiful relationship here. I really do. I think they're clicking, man. You can see it. I think I wouldn't be shocked if Danielson is really, really tight with Tony and becomes an integral backstage part, because all the signs are showing that.
Yeah, they look at each other. Did we just become best friends? And they're going to do karate in the garage. I mean,
yeah, exactly. They're going to break the swords out and start cutting things in two and making bunk beds. Come on.
All right, let's get into the week ahead and talk about everything going on in wrestling.
The week ahead.
All right, tonight on Raw, probably happening already. We have a Money in the Bank qualifying match, Damian Priest versus Matt Riddle. We have The Miz versus Cody Rhodes, and Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens will take on Gunther and Ludwig Kaiser. So some good matches here. We have about, right now it's 9:18 p.m. We have a significant amount of Raw. So you guys, thanks for hanging with us while Raw is on. But, you know, your thoughts on Raw lately? Have you been watching it? You get it on your Sling.
I definitely keep up with it. I don't sit down for the entire 3 hours. I watch it for Cody, man. I'm a Cody mark, and I'm a Sammy and Kevin mark. So I'm always tuning in. I don't think it's terrible. I think SmackDown's probably the better show right now, but
yeah,
I think Raw is better than it was 3 years ago. I mean, by a landslide. And I think there's a delicate balance that's going on with Raw with Triple H, where I feel like he's trying to inject more wrestling in it, which is a good thing. But then I do think there's mid-carders that are falling by the wayside because they're giving us 15 to 20 minute matches.
right.
You know, there's a lot of mouths to feed in WWE. And even with 3 hours, when you're booking some of this stuff, I feel like some people aren't getting attention. So it's good. It's good. It's not like it used to be. It used to be terrible. 3 years ago it was completely unwatchable, but
on NXT on Tuesday night, we have the Heritage Cup. Noam Dar is defending it against Nathan Frazier. Baron Corbin will be in action against Dragunov, and we'll have Tyler Bate Wesley and Mustafa Ali versus Joe Gacy in the Dyad. So some interesting stuff going on NXT. Baron Corbin being there. People are saying Seth Rollins might appear because Braun Breaker challenged him, so we might maybe we'll see him Tuesday night, maybe we'll see him next week, but I think we're going to see Seth out of NXT one of these days.
Possibly, or we're going to see Braun Breaker on Raw one of these days.
True.
I love Nathan Frazier, man. Big on that guy, and I love Dragunov, so that's enough to tune in.
On Wednesday night, AEW Dynamite, we have an AEW World Title Eliminator, MJF versus Adam Cole, which we'll have a lot of conversation about that next week. The AEW Women's World Championship, Toni Storm defending against Britt Baker, Nyla Rose, Sky Blue, or Mercedes Martinez. The Elite, Hangman Page, as they're calling them, the Hung Bucks versus Blackpool Combat Club, which is obviously Jon Moxley, Claudio, and Wheeler Yuta. And we have a really awesome 8-man tag here. Sting, Darby, Orange Cassidy, and Keith Lee versus the Mogul Embassy, which is Swerve Strickland, Brian Cage, Khan, and Toa Leona. So mashing up some of their stories. Obviously, Swerve and Orange seem like they're destined for another rematch. That match killed it on Raw, Dynamite last week. And then Sting and Darby Allin tearing it up a little bit with Brian Cage. So a little mini feud going on here, and I like it.
Yeah, I mean, Tony pulled out all the stops for their return to DC. First place they ever did. Episode 1 of Dynamite was in the same building, so it's going to be looks like a big show. Did Sky Blue get the win? I think it's Tony Storm's Sky Blue, right? Did she get the upset win on Rampage, I believe?
Oh, that was on Rampage. Yeah, so it's Tony Storm versus Sky Blue. So I guess when I put the notes in here, and spoiler alert, didn't watch Rampage, so
yeah, I'm pretty sure Sky Blue took it home. And I mean, the Elite Blackpool Combat Club, that's extremely interesting. And MJF Adam Cole, man, this could go good, this could go bad. I'm very intrigued by this.
I would see Adam Cole winning. Yeah, I mean, he has to. How could he not win this match?
I'm just so torn because I didn't think I don't want to see Adam Cole lose, and I don't want to see MJF lose. That's why I was more of a fan of keeping them apart, for kind of how WWE's doing Cody and Roman. Like, we know it's coming, but keep them apart. That's how I was hoping they would treat them. But here we go.
As the great Prophet's offspring would say, got to keep them separated. But we go to we go to Thursday, Ring of Honor, the ROH World Television Championship on the line. Samoa Joe against Matt Sydal. The World 6-Man Tag Team Championship on the line. The Mogul Embassy, Bishop Khan, Toa Leona, and Brian Cage defending against AR Fox, Action Andretti, and Darius Martin.
That'll be a good match.
Makeshift version of Top Flight without Dante there. And on other Thursday, if you want to tune in for Impact or watch both, Impact Wrestling announced that Alex Shelley and Chris Sable will kick off Thursday's Impact. No matches announced yet, but we're going to get Against All Odds Fallout, some Slammiversary builds, so probably get some build towards Aldis and Shelley. Some good stuff there on Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm pumped to see what the Motor City Machine Guns, how they kick off their title reigns. I have a feeling Nick Aldis is probably going to interrupt.
On Friday for SmackDown, Roman Reigns returning. We got AJ Styles and Mishin versus Karrion Kross and Scarlett. And we get a gauntlet match to determine the number one contenders to the undisputed WWE Tag Team Championship. LWO versus the Brawling Brutes versus Pretty Deadly versus Street Profits versus, wow, they emerged, Gallows and Anderson. They're back in the fold.
Wow, finally. Big fan of Pretty Deadly. So, and them matched up in a match with Street Profits is fun. I like Brawling Brutes too. LWO's been fun to watch, but the big one for me, man, please God, let AJ Styles get Karrion where he needs to be in this company. I feel like Karrion Kross, if handled correctly, man, I watched him on the Independents. I watched him in Impact. The guy has a mind for creativity and character. He just needs to be in the right program with the right guy. I hope I'm not super big on this intergender match, but I hope it's a step into a bigger feud with AJ Styles where AJ can get this guy in the eyes of the fans where he needs to be, because I truly think Karrion could be a super heel in this company and be someone worthwhile, but they've just botched him so much. I'm pulling for Karrion because I'm a big fan of him.
Yeah, when he debuted, it felt like he was going to be this foil in Roman's plans. They had it, and this could have to do with Triple H not having full control, and Karrion Kross was stuck in the crosshairs.
Yeah, he attacked Drew McIntyre, and I was
right.
like, here we go, off to the races, and then it just kind of petered out. So,
I mean, he got the Bray Wyatt treatment. That's essentially what it is. It was Bray Wyatt. Now it's mid-card fodder because whoever was in charge is no longer fully in charge now, and they still have says. And obviously, Paul Levesque has a huge say in what goes on. But
always been a big fan, man. I remember when AEW was in the early days and Karrion was a free agent and he was tied up in that Impact contract. When the Impact contract finally came off of him and he was a free agent, I was dying to see him in AEW. And that's back before they went and signed all of these people. But then when he went to the NXT, I enjoyed a little bit of his NXT stuff, but man, the main roster stuff has just left a lot to be desired, you know?
I agree with you. And I think he has a lot of potential. I'm not the biggest fan of his NXT run, but I did go back and see some of the Killer Cross stuff on the indies and stuff. There's a lot there. And obviously,
there's a
people
lot,
see it.
especially with Scarlett. The entire package they have, if done correctly, they need to let him have more input in his character, because he's a fine wrestler, he looks good, but if you really dive into his promos,
Yeah.
he would produce these like independent kind of pre-tape vignettes on his own, and they were incredible. The guy has a mind for like cinema. He gets it. If they would let him handle that a little more on the main roster and have a little more input, I think he could do a lot.
On AW Collision Saturday, the debut, 6/17, we're going to get the main event, CMFTR versus Bullet Club, Gold, and Samoa Joe. We're going to get other matches announced on Wednesday, I'm sure. They're going to give us reasons to watch. I don't think the Chicago crowd is going to be anything less than just absolutely ecstatic to see Punk back. The interesting part will be in the future for two things. What will Punk's reaction be? And also, will they be able to sell these tickets that are kind of having a hard time being moved elsewhere, where they have this full Canada tour?
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be a buzz after the fact, but maybe that's what they need to light the fire of eventually pulling the trigger on doing this elite thing, where if things start to putter around, where they have this huge TV deal and tickets are not selling well, maybe they have to pull that trick out, because
if that's what it takes, like a new show drowning, please. I think a lot of people aren't buying.
It seems like Chad is frozen again, but I agree with what he's saying.
Am I back?
Are you back? Okay, I got you. I see you.
Am I gone or you gone?
No, I'm still here. I think you're a little blurry.
Are we back?
I'm here.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, I got you. I completely agree with you. What you're saying, it makes the most sense, because you got to pull the trigger on something meaningful, make people watch on Saturday night.
Yeah, and I think fans are they're worried it's going to be Rampage. I'm excited for Collision. I mean, the match is fine. Punk's coming back. Yeah, that's cool. I just want to see what the show looks like. I hope it's a complete. I don't want to see Dynamite Stage Part 2. I want to see a completely original show that looks all its own. So I'm really excited to see what the stage and all that looks like.
So next week, we're going to go over Forbidden Doors card that's growing. We're going to go over Triple Mania's card that's almost set. Triple Mania is going to be in Tijuana on 7/15. There's some drama brewing with Bandito and Roosh for AAA, but we'll talk about that next week. And of course, Impact Slammiversary on the same day as Triple Mania. So what a day for pro wrestling. But Chad, that's all we got, man. Lead us out. Give us the plugs. Tell us what's going on. Broken VCR with the flagship, the debate. Everything's been happening for the tavern. A lot of good stuff going on.
Yeah, theturnbuckletavern.com. Go check us out. Everything there. We got Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Those are the three big things to hit us up on. Show your love, show your support. We got t-shirts. If you want one of those, they're there. Broken VCR this week. You can follow Broken VCR. It's got its own channel on Apple and Spotify. Me and Hawk are in the middle of our June Gloom series. Last week, we dug into In the Bedroom, a good old-fashioned bummer. And then this week, we're digging into The American Friend, 1977. Good movie. And the debate. Check out the debate. We had Jonah from Recap, Rewind, Relive. Good topics. A little WWE heavy this week. We try to switch it up for you guys. And then the flagship will be Thursday morning. We'll be talking all about the fallout from this big Dynamite DC show.
So on my end, obviously Thursday night, you guys can find me Honor Society breaking down those three matches we talked about. Big TV title match, Samoa Joe and Matt Sydal. Also Friday, we're on the tail end of WWF 1998 season 3. We're getting ready for season 4, but we're not saying goodbye to WWF quite yet. We have a UK only event to go over. Capital Carnage and 2 Raws. X-Pac gets a shot at the title against Rock, which is crazy in a main event. It's a UK pay-per-view that didn't have that many stakes back in the day, but it's interesting now as we approach SummerSlam in Detroit, and then Money in the Bank before that is going to be in the UK, where how important UK has been as far as WWF and WWE canon throughout history. It wasn't treated as such during the Attitude Era. Insurrection, Capital Carnage, some of these events were just used as just like content for the sake of content. Also on my end, thank you so much for everyone that came up to me. Brooklyn Comic Con yesterday. I had a great weekend of professional wrestling, highlighted by Remarkable Wrestling's Don't Bet Against Me 2 at Brooklyn Comic Con. We had a 4-match pop-up show, which was awesome, headlined by Gabriel Sky and Anthony Gangone. Hoping that can be available in some capacity. If someone, it was filmed, but I'm not sure how it's going to live, if it's going to be IWTV or not. Stay tuned for that. I posted some highlights on my Instagram. You guys can check that out at Acefield Retro. It was a great day. All the fans that came up to us, and it was awesome to be a part of the day. And of course, thank you to Victory Pro Wrestling for letting me be a part of Justified, handing out tavern stickers and being a part of that show. Anthony Gangone was there as well, tore it up as well. That's my boy. And on Friday night, went to NYWC, the Warriors, which was a great cause. It was a fundraiser for a local child in the community, falling on some hard times, battling sickness and all that. So good show with the community coming together and rallying, raising some money for a kid that had a great time, enjoying some professional wrestling, some friends that you guys have seen here on the tavern, specifically the Slime Balls. Joey Conway main evented
awesome
against, they had Big O, who's the NYWC champion, and they also had Sal Savelli, but their partner was the principal of the school. And I got to say, I wish I remember the dude's name, but the principal of Comsawag High School absolutely tore it up. Came out to Real American, Hulk Hogan's theme song. He got the pin, finished with a lion salt. This dude went all over the place, did monkey flips. Like, this was not a celebrity spot. This guy obviously trained for this his whole life, and this was his time to shine. And it was awesome. I mean, it was a fun show that just everyone was reacting. The kids loved it. But yeah, shout out to NYWC and what they did for the Tanaka family.
It's what it's all about, man. The kids, wrestling's for the kids. It's where it all starts. That's where, if wrestling grabs you when you're a kid, it usually stays with you the rest of your life.
100%. Well, that's all we got here. Again, you guys can go to the turnbuckletavern.com for everything you need. We have a lot of great stuff coming up, keeping you guys in the loop for all the wrestling throughout the summer.
Yeah, guys, it's been fun. We'll be back Monday, 7 p.m., Tuesdays on Apple and Spotify. Wrestling Tonight, keeping you up to date around the wrestling world. Until next Monday, when we wine and dine with you kings and queens, stay out of the alley and away from the pork and beans. God luck and good speed.
Reach for the sky, boy.